When if hell is real, it is right here, right now. Wounded soldiers kneel, leaning on each other. One of them is pierced by enemy arrows. He speaks to his prince. This is the only way he can repay the prince. He has no regrets. Kyrie begs him to hold on, but Kyrie just tells his prince to grip his sword tighter. Do not give up. Kyrie hands his blade over and pleads one last time. Taking the sword, the prince looks up and screams in pure agony over his fallen comrade. Enemies surround him completely. Years ago, a powerful nation known as Kairos, founded by dragons and humans, demanded a legendary treasure from the prince's homeland. But Secretia refused. That single defiance sparked a brutal, bloody war. This was not just the beginning of a conflict, it was the absolute end. The desperate warrior fighting here is Prince Bern, younger brother of King Chase. Bern knows everything is lost. Death already waits with open arms. Yet he has absolutely no intention of giving up to his enemies. He loudly declares that he will never yield, and they will not defeat him easily. Bern fights on. He is, and always will be, Secretia's ultimate loyal sword. The enemy forces close in on him, marching in tight formation. It is the terrifying magical alliance of Kairos and Vulcan. These invaders are the ones who turned Prince Bern's homeland into a burning hell. An enemy leader steps forward, mockingly stating that he is glad to finally meet him. This is Arsene, the supreme mage of Vulcan. Arsene smugly asks his name. Bern coldly responds that he has forgotten his name. He is only his king's sword. With a final surge of strength, Bern charges forward to strike down his opponent. Arsene sneers, promising to remember the brave prince before unleashing his deadly magic. The blast hits, his entire life flashes before his eyes. Bern relives the horrific destruction of his kingdom, a deeply agonizing sight. As his vision blurs, the last remnants of light fade away. But then Bern suddenly opens his eyes to a gentle voice. The voice tells him it is time to wake up. He is greeted by unfamiliar faces. They politely ask if he slept well, leaving him completely disoriented and confused. They urge him to hurry, mentioning that Prince Plants has already departed. Bern looks down at his hands. They are completely whole and safe. He mutters in shock that his arm should be severed, making a maid scream. She begs him not to say such awful things, throwing the servants into panic. They wonder how he could say his arm is missing, assuming he had a nightmare. But then Bern hears the name of a person he despises with all his heart. A healthy body, strange servants, and unfamiliar memories flood his mind. This massive wave of foreign, stolen memories completely overwhelms his mind. Desperate for answers, he asks the head servant to tell him exactly who he is. The servant respectfully replies that his name is Calian Reign Series. He is now the third prince of his worst enemy nation, a living nightmare. Vivid memories of his final moments on the battlefield flash through his mind. He remembers standing before Arsene. Looking at his frightened servant, he demands some answers. The nervous servant trembles as the prince sharply asks what day it is. They reply that it is April 28th, in the year 522. The servant worries, while Bern realizes he has gone 10 years back in time. This meant there were still 10 years left before the war, 10 years before everything fell apart. The war would break out because of the time axis, an artifact rumored to turn back time. It had suddenly appeared inside the royal palace of Secretia, and things quickly got out of hand. Word of its existence spread across the world like wildfire, reaching the ears of powerful empires. The dominant force on the continent, the Kairos Empire, wanted to claim it for themselves. Kairos demanded they hand over the Axis, but that was out of the question. No matter how powerful the empire was, the artifact belonged solely to Secretia. A weapon that powerful could never be allowed to fall into the hands of their enemy. Having received a blunt refusal, the Kairos Empire immediately declared war. The king held Prince Bern by the hand with tearful eyes, begging him not to go. Everyone who marched off to this war had died. The king simply could not lose Bern too. But Bern was stubborn. On that terrible day, Chase watched his own brother die in battle. He witnessed the tragedy with his own eyes. If only they could undo everything. If only they could go back to the days before that cursed relic ever appeared. A wild idea hit the young prince. He had to seize this impossible chance. What if Chase actually used the time axis to turn back the clock? This would be his absolute last chance to stop the downfall of Secretia. The servant reminded him that breakfast was waiting and time was running out. Calian quickly apologized for keeping them waiting and said he would get ready right away. Even if he had to live as a prince of Kairos, he would take this shot. He had to seize this opportunity, no matter what it took. The heavy doors to the dining hall swung open, and the attendant made the announcement. The third Prince of Kairos had arrived, though breakfast was already in full swing. The nervous maid apologized to him, as she did not realize they had company. Prince Randall had arrived first. It was the formidable first prince himself. All three royal siblings were half-brothers, but Randall was tied to the holy land of Tencel. By royal decree, the brothers were forced to eat breakfast together every single morning. Looking through Calian's memories, he was basically a ghost at this table. He quietly offered an apology for being late, but he was completely ignored. Absolutely nobody paid any attention to him. It was like he did not even exist. Calian figured the first prince only acknowledged one brother in this room. Just then the second prince, Plants, stepped into the dining hall. Calian stared at the young prince and felt a jolt of pure shock. How could a royal prince show up to the dining table looking so incredibly disheveled? He wondered if this mess of a boy was truly destined to become the Mad King. Lance's unkempt look suggested he was not exactly right in the head. Yet Calian's memories showed that even the first prince never dared to cross him. This was because the current queen was the mother of Prince Plants. Her political influence was so massive that absolutely no one in the palace dared challenge her. Our hero had no clue how he would survive trapped in a den of snakes like this. Plants scoffed, muttering about how irritating this all was with a cold sneer. Calian mentally forced himself to stay calm. He had to be incredibly patient here. He could not afford to waste the precious chance his brother had died to give him. But right now, a wave of suffocating rage was burning hot in his throat. Plants of Kairos, the monster who destroyed his homeland, stood right before his eyes. Hold back, Calian could barely stop himself from breaking completely free. Plank was absolutely furious, screaming at Calian for daring to look at him like that. Their oldest brother Randall slammed his fist on the table, demanding they stop right now. The three brothers shared a tense, silent look before Plank announced he was done. He stormed out of the dining room, muttering that the red-eyed brat ruined his appetite. With Plank gone, Randall warned Calian, "Watch your step." He reminded him that His Majesty's birthday was close, and they did not need trouble. Calian froze. Did his brother seriously think this whole mess was his fault? Wasn't it the lunatic who just stormed out that started the entire fight? Jan rushed over, asking if Calian was okay or if he had been hurt. The servant gently offered to wipe him down, since food had splashed all over him. Even though everyone else ignored him, having someone who truly cared felt incredibly warm. Jan watched out for him like a real brother, and it meant the world. Calian patted the servant on the shoulder, quietly thanking Jan for his genuine concern. Jan gasped. Normally, the young prince would be holding back bitter tears. Why was he smiling now? The secret lay with the ancient dragon. Cispanian was the first queen of Caius, and in human form she had striking jet black hair and blood-red eyes that burned with a sacred fire. Though Calian was the only prince to inherit those legendary features, his magical power was completely insignificant, forcing the third prince to hide his. Those unique red eyes, he just wanted to avoid upsetting his older brothers. The primary bully was Prince Plank. Peeking into these memories felt incredibly awkward. Seriously, he could not understand how anyone would hide their face just out of fear. This prince's life was tragic. The third prince had lived in absolute misery. Suddenly, Jan asked for orders. Calian calmly announced it was time to head back, but Jan noticed the change. The prince was acting different today, as if inspired by some knightly romance. The original Calian was born to common concubine, leaving him entirely powerless. He had been a timid, fearful boy who lacked the strength to protect himself. Now the reincarnated hero had to deal with this fragile new body. Calian asked Jan how old he was, and Jan answered he was almost 15. His birthday was in 4 months, but Calian knew his dark fate lay ahead. He was destined to die after a failed attempt to poison Queen Silic. The young prince would hang himself before execution. That was the tragic end. Not happening, he refused to let this grim future play out. Knowing mercenaries would strike soon, Calian rushed to the window while Jan begged him to slow down before he fell, but he could not sit idle. Knowing the danger approaching his new body, Calian ordered Jan to find some scissors immediately. Jan quickly obeyed, wondering what his master planned to do. Calian replied that he wanted a change, determined to rewrite his own destiny. Shatter it. If fate was real, he would break it, the servants gasped. If Prince Plank found out, he would be furious, but Calian remained calm. He told them everything would be fine and to leave it to him. But when the second prince saw his younger brother, he sneered in disgust. He declared Calian had completely lost his mind, leaving Jan utterly terrified. France called out to his younger brother, mocking his red eyes. He coolly reminded the second prince that his name was Calian. The young prince remained completely calm, while France nodded in a sneer. Suddenly, France grabbed a knife off the table and lunged at Calian. Panic filled the room as Yan gasped, but Calian stood completely still. With lightning speed, Calian barehandedly caught the heavy blade flying toward him. The weapon was moving too fast, slicing deep into his palm as blood dripped. France shrugged, casually claiming that his hand had just slipped. He sneered, acting surprised that his dear brother got hurt. Calian kept his composure, telling his brother not to worry about it. Retreating to his chambers, the young prince had his servants dress the wound. Yan urgently suggested summoning a healer, but Calian immediately refused. Calian quietly asked his loyal servant why he hadn't even tried to dodge. Yan had clearly seen the weapon coming, yet he stood there completely frozen. Calian pointed out that Yan had plenty of time to escape. Yan admitted he was terrified of how the volatile Prince France would react. He did not want France's wrath redirected at his young master. Feeling sick at the sight of blood, Calian dismissed him to wash up. He ordered Yan to ensure absolutely no one entered his room. During the sudden assault, Calian had instinctively tried to activate his aura. But a searing, agonizing pain had instantly stabbed straight through his chest. He needed to recreate the feeling, to examine his own body. Investigating further, he discovered 3 powerful magical seals binding his heart. How on earth could Calian actually possess these latent wizard powers? Days passed, yet the cut remained unhealed, deeply worrying his loyal servant. Calian brushed it off before receiving the royal tailor, Slake, for a fitting. Slake stared at the third prince with a look of pure dread. Stuttering an apology, Slake admitted Calian strongly resembled the late Lady Freya. The tailor bowed repeatedly, but Calian was already weary of these reactions. Constantly compared to a mother he never knew, he despised his own face. It was so unbearable that he had banned all mirrors from his quarters. Shaking off the bitter thought, the prince told Slake to continue. The quiet tailor nodded nervously and prepared to take the prince's measurements. Measuring him, Slake remarked that the young prince was far too thin. Boys his age should be growing, but Calian claimed he ate well. Yet, catching his reflection, Calian knew something was deeply wrong with him. No wonder he felt so incredibly uneasy looking at his own frail body. The royal family of Kairos possessed the ancient blood of dragons. They descended from the legendary heroes who once sealed away primeval darkness. Blessed by these legendary figures, the Kairos dynasty possessed great healing magic. These divine gifts should make him incredibly resilient and strong. This meant his hand should have healed instantly, yet the pain lingered. He realized he desperately needed an expert who understood the flow of mana. Interrupting his thoughts, Slake presented the fine garments prepared for the upcoming banquet. But Calian could only think of finding a powerful grand wizard. Alan Manhwa, he absolutely had to meet him. He was one of the 3 legendary wizards on the entire continent to ever reach the 7th circle, a true pioneer. Inspiring an entire generation, he was even invited to the grand birthday party of King Kairos, though he was turned away at the gates for some unknown reason. That humiliation spread to neighboring kingdoms like Sika, yet 10 years later, the insulted wizard proved his worth to the world by becoming the only 8th circle archmage alive. Calian believed no one understood mana better. He hoped this Grand Master could help him solve his current physical crisis. Calian could only guess at the real reasons behind that old banquet ban. Since mages were hated in Kairos, there was absolutely no guarantee that Alan Manhwa would even hear him out, especially since the palace was swarming with imperial knights, all thanks to the influence of the Bryson family, the faction backing Prince Plance's royal mother, to keep them in check. The young prince desperately needed the support of powerful wizards. If he could win Alan over, he could prevent the devastating war plans would surely unleash. He had to handle this threat before it was too late. Slowly, Calian adjusted to his new body. His physical wounds had nearly healed. Since Plants chose to ignore his existence entirely, everything went quite smoothly. Yan reported that the prince had a writing lesson scheduled in the morning. followed by an afternoon banquet with the Queen and Viscount Bryson. The Viscount was visiting to discuss the upcoming royal birthday celebration. Calian knew that sooner or later he would have to face that dangerous man. Regardless, Yan asked if His Highness intended to practice his training today. The prince simply replied that he wanted to run a few laps around the lake. He told his servants not to worry, then quietly approached the training grounds. But after finishing his run, Calian stopped and leaned heavily against a tree. Breathing hard, a concerned maid rushed up, asking how he was feeling. This was Merlin Fiat, the second daughter of the outer fortress captain. As his personal maid, she kept close track of his running routine. She pointed out that he ran 4 laps yesterday, but today he struggled heavily. He had not even finished his 3rd lap. Calian sighed, feeling his exhaustion. Calian quickly declined, insisting he was perfectly fine, but he knew better. Any healer would immediately detect the secret magic circles inside his body. Even Yan did not know Calian could use magic. If exposed, he was dead. He had to play it safe. Calian repeated that he just needed some rest. Just then, a booming shout echoed across the training fields, catching his attention. An instructor barked at the recruits to keep their eyes on the blade. He ordered them to maintain absolute concentration. The prince turned to watch. The elite palace knights were in the middle of an intense training session. Their leader commanded them to strike with decisive, lethal precision. Watching them move, a sudden, powerful memory flashed in Calian's mind. Merlin mentioned that this was the training ground for the palace knights. Calian smiled, saying it looked fun. The maid was completely stunned. The prince had never shown any interest in the sword before today. But the young man simply smiled, replying that he was starting to change. He was quite interested now. Merlin quickly reminded him who these Knights of Paul actually were. The prince replied that he already knew. Officially, they were the royal guards. In reality, they belonged to the Bysum family, who kept the king in check. Suddenly, the commander of Paul's knights ordered the young onlookers to leave the training ground. The officer coldly added that his men disliked being watched while they trained. Hearing this, Merlin Fiat stepped forward and shouted at the arrogant officer to behave. She reminded him that he was standing directly before the 3rd Prince of Caius. The officer scoffed, sarcastically asking if this boy was really the prince himself. The commander smirked, saying he honestly thought a little rat had just crawled in. Merlin flared up in pure anger, wondering how a mere knight dared to speak so insolently. But the officer shrugged, claiming it was just an innocent thought, so why was she overreacting? Then the commander smugly questioned what the 3rd prince was even doing here. They were following the queen's orders, and the prince was just in their way. Hearing this, Calian calmly took a step back and said he would leave them to it. The commander smirked, absolutely certain that this prince was just a helpless, fragile boy. But suddenly the knight froze, completely shocked by the terrifying aura erupting from the prince. With cold, sharp eyes, Calian told the commander he wanted to clarify just one thing. He stepped forward, walking right up to the officer with absolute, unwavering confidence. The prince quietly asked what the commander's actual assignment was today. 2 nearby knights approached their commander, whispering in confusion about what was going on. They wondered why the forgotten 3rd prince was even bothering them. Everyone usually ignored him. The commander told the prince they were training right now and had no time for pleasantries. He coldly suggested that His Highness should run along and mind his own business. But Calian just repeated his question, staring deeply into the commander's eyes. Annoyed, the officer replied that his job was to strengthen the royal guard to protect the kingdom. Protecting the kingdom and the royal family, Calian murmured, nodding in agreement. He casually reached out and grabbed a thin tree branch, snapping it off effortlessly. Holding the twig, he asked why the officer was failing so miserably at his duties. Calian stepped even closer to the commander, holding the small stick like a weapon. The commander scoffed, claiming these basic training drills were already a waste of his time. Without warning, the 3rd prince suddenly swung the broken twig directly at him. The commander realized that if he did not block this, he might actually get hurt. He reflexively drew his heavy steel sword, easily blocking the prince's incoming strike. The commander smirked, confident that he was only blocking a useless little wooden stick. But with a deft flick of his wrist, Calian twisted the twig and disarmed him. Talk about a reality check, his sword clattered down, leaving everyone speechless. Calian calmly noted that he had never even held a real sword in his life. Yet the commander failed to predict his simplest movements. How incredibly disappointing. The knight shivered, completely overwhelmed by the crushing, suffocating pressure radiating from the prince. Calian pointed out that a man sworn to protect the crown was insulting royalty. Worse, he had drawn a weapon on a prince, which bordered on treason. The commander stared in absolute horror, unable to comprehend the monster standing before him. Realizing his grave mistake, the officer fell to his knees, trembling with terror. He desperately begged for forgiveness, stammering that he had not been thinking clearly. He frantically swore that he would never dream of committing treason against the crown. The subordinates watching their commander were completely stunned. The officer was absolutely furious, humiliated by an insignificant prince. He would never forgive this disgrace. Meanwhile, Jan questioned His Highness. How did he get a horse after claiming he was just going for a walk by the lake? Calian calmly explained he just took the horse, named Raven, but Jan still pushed for answers. Jan kept asking where the prince had been and how he got the beast. Once the clash with the knight commander settled, Calian asked what was wrong with the horse. The knight explained that Prince Plans had been trying to tame the beast for ages. But he failed because of its fierce temper, leaving Jan completely puzzled. How could His Highness just take a horse that belonged to Prince Plans? Calian simply explained it was a stray, so whoever tamed it became its master. Besides, they did not need to explain where it came from, but Jan worried. What if Prince Plans found out? Calian kept insisting it would be fine. Suddenly, Calian winced, clutching his injured hand. Jan and Merlin panicked. They worried what happened to his hand, while Calian cursed his weak body. It was not ready for such heavy strain. Jan asked if he overdid it. But Calian just laughed, saying he felt rested and was actually having fun. And of course, someone was secretly watching them from the shadows. He realized that if he kept lingering there, he would surely miss dinner. Later, the young noble listened closely to a report about the third prince. He smiled, finding the report fascinating. Even worms squirm when stepped on. It all started to fit together. He believed that even if a weakling struggles, it would never change the core nature of a useless, trash prince. Destroying him immediately would be boring. For now, everything is perfectly fine. They would simply observe. Later, surrounded by his brothers, Calian felt suffocated. This tense royal dining atmosphere was something he could never get used to. Calian glanced over at the second prince, wondering why he was so incredibly quiet. He quietly wondered if the Queen and Viscount Bryson were running late. Meanwhile, Prince Plans wore his annoyance openly, unable to hide his childish anger. Just then, a strong scent of perfume drifted in. Calian knew she had arrived. The true shadow ruler of the kingdom, Queen Celestia Bryson, finally stepped in. As the second queen of Kyles, she took power after the first queen passed. Backed by the influential Bryson family, she quickly seized control of the royal knights. Almost all the powerful nobles in the kingdom sided with her faction as well. Because of this, Queen Celestia's supreme authority grew more absolute every single day. Meanwhile, the powerless third prince, Calian, was treated like a joke by everyone. Even a simple commander mocked him, but Viscount Bryson offered to handle the issue. Queen Celestia casually added that they should just offer the man proper compensation. She made it clear that such minor issues did not deserve her attention. She wondered why she should waste precious time on such nonsense. The queen then turned her sharp gaze to Calian, noting his recent change. She remarked that he had grown quite a bit, but Calian played it down. He humbly replied he had a long way to go, prompting Viscount Bryson to speak. Viscount admitted he barely recognized him, especially now that his face was clear. He praised the new look, introducing himself as Viscount Renan Bryson, the queen's relative. Lennon, the second son of Marquis Bryson, points out that since the third prince is still growing, he will definitely get taller, but Queen Silica taps the table with her fan, signaling her brother to quiet down. Viscount Lennon quickly adds that he is starving and wants the food served immediately. Meanwhile, Calian quietly notes how clueless the owner of the Bryson merchantry actually is. Queen Silica then demands to know why Prince Plants kept her in the dark. Plants just acts clueless. Asking what they are even talking about, Queen Silica mentions his disobedient horse, but the second prince scoffs that the beast was always useless. Plants then abruptly stands up and demands to excuse himself. Fast forward 3 weeks, and the entire capital is celebrating the king's birthday, and the entire city is frantically preparing for the grand event. The citizens instantly spot a majestic delegation of elves arriving. Their heavy wooden carts are stacked high with birthday gifts for the king. This upcoming banquet looks completely Spectacular, meaning all three princes are bound to be swamped with royal preparations. And behind closed doors, a tailor is busy measuring Calian for a brand new ceremonial suit, but the tailor suddenly stops, staring at the prince in complete shock. Calian is bleeding from his nose, catching both of them completely off guard. The worried servants immediately rush over. What is happening to the prince? Yan frantically screams for a handkerchief right this second, but Calian calmly waves them off, claiming he has just been sleeping pretty terribly lately. The bleeding stops almost instantly. The tailor bows and apologizes for his sudden outburst, but admits he is seeing a much bigger issue here. He points out that the prince has lost a lot of weight compared to 3 weeks ago. Calian is genuinely startled. Is he really getting that thin? He tries to blame his grueling workouts, but in reality, his physical condition is only deteriorating. Even during the quiet night hours when his tired body should be resting, he feels completely drained, and with that persistent chest pain. Whenever he tries to channel mana, there is definitely something wrong with his heart. The worried tailor warns him not to be so incredibly reckless with his well-being, asking if he has even seen a royal physician yet. Calian quickly brushes it off. There is absolutely no need for a doctor over a minor nosebleed. Yan quickly steps in, teasingly blaming it on a bad habit from the night before. He sighs that it must be quite embarrassing for the prince to discuss such personal matters openly. Yan then assures the tailor that Calian is eating and sleeping perfectly. It is just a harmless habit, so there is no real need to worry. But once they are alone, Yan asks if he is truly okay, noting how incredibly pale his master looks. Calian knows his physical state is deteriorating, feeling like he might collapse at any moment. To cover up his secret magic and the agonizing strain of his blocked mana, Yan intentionally ruined the prince's perfect reputation. Meanwhile, the tailor promises to adjust the suit to fit his shrinking frame, though time is running pretty short. Yan reassures him that the prince has other schedules, providing more than enough time before the main celebration. The tailor is relieved to have a bit of breathing room, deciding to focus on the afternoon outfit first. But Calian is deeply worried. At this rate, the entire royal court will discover his failing heart. He desperately needs to get in touch with Alan Manhwa. No mistakes allowed today, but the breakfast was suddenly cancelled. Called off, replaced by private meetings with each prince. Calian was surprised. No group gathering. Instead, they were expected to see him entirely alone. Why not gather together? Regardless, the private meetings went ahead anyway. Calian finally entered the king's office. Sitting behind the desk, completely ignoring him, was King Runius. Calian bowed deeply, greeting his majesty. Still, the king ignored him. No look, no nod. Calian knew he was being frozen out. Despite his shaky grasp of Kairos etiquette, Calian knew this behavior was incredibly rude. Sit down, the king commanded. Calian then politely offered his warmest congratulations. Wishing him a happy 38th birthday, the king gave a dry thanks, asking how he was. He looked quite healthy, but Calian remembered the physician warning him that the prince desperately needed a proper medical examination. Even servants with no contact knew the truth. His body was wasting away. Now Calian understood why his father insisted on separate audiences despite his busy schedule. A group meeting would force the king to actually focus on his sons. Actually talk. Private meetings were just the best option. For him, even spending brief moments with his sons on his birthday felt like a chore. To this cold king, the deeper Calian dug into this fractured royal family uncovered total rot. It was a thoroughly repulsive family. A father who did not care if his children lived or died. First Prince Randall was completely detached from the world. Meanwhile, the second Prince, France, flaunted his absolute lack of manners. Then there was the powerful Queen Silica, who held enough sway to openly look down on the king. One of them was trying to destroy him, but who? Now the grand celebration finally begins. Calian watched his smiling relatives, wondering which one of them hired the assassins. As the third prince appeared in public, the crowd gasped in shock. He had completely transformed. Calian was no longer the same timid child. In comparison, second Prince France looked utterly pathetic and disheveled. The crowd whispered that some royals would never change. And there was no use complaining. But get this, something had shifted. Something heavy and intangible. Everyone in the crowd felt it. Those in the square stared as Calian, the third Prince of Kairos, entered. Hushed whispers spread like wildfire through the hall. The rumors were absolutely true. The boy with black hair and crimson eyes looked exactly like Cispanian, Calian had cut. The bangs that used to hide his face and pinned a bold red brooch to his chest. No more hiding, he was done, Yan quietly asked the prince. Why everyone was staring so intensely, it was because Calian looked absolutely breathtaking. The royal designer would have wept with joy. Kyrie dryly noted that people were only looking because they were astonished. The timid prince had the courage to wear such flashy decorations. Calian asked Yan if his family lived in the capital. The servant replied that his younger sister and father went back to their hometown, though the others remained. Calian then asked when they would arrive at the main palace. Yan replied they would attend once they received an official invitation. Yan then asked when he should bring the horse, Raven, to the garden. He could tell Calian wanted to avoid that topic, since everyone has secrets. Some things are better left unsaid, so Calian decided to wait. Scanning the crowd, the prince searched for a specific guest. While searching, Calian asked Yan if he knew the history of this hall. Yan explained it was named after the legendary first patriarch of the Siegfrieds, the legendary Duke Kitro, one of the 8 heroes of the ancient war. In fact, the Siegfrieds were the only duke family in Kyrus. Despite their immense power, they always remained fiercely loyal to the crown. For over 500 years, they defended the borders of Tisania. Calian was impressed, while Yan asked who his master was looking for. A booming voice praised the classic Siegfried summer night, belonging to none other than Duke Sleman von Siegfried himself, a man radiating absolute confidence and joy. He respected his family's long history of unbroken loyalty to the throne. To test the Duke, Calian suddenly released his mana. Siegfried felt the energy immediately and located him. The prince had deliberately let out a wave of mana, catching his attention instantly. As a sword master, he could easily sense the surge. The young prince quickly turned his back, telling Yan to act completely natural. Up on the stage, the king raised his glass, thanking the guests. He wished them a great night, and everyone toasted to the king. Slipping out, Calian and Yan climbed down a rope into the quiet garden. Mounting his horse, the prince smiled, expecting nothing less from his clever companion. Raven was remarkably smart, but Yan noticed a strange pattern with the stallion. Without Calian, Raven behaved like a completely different beast. Yan noted how incredibly fast the horse learned, and first impressions rarely lied. His loyal servant pointed out they just needed to reach the main gate. Once they arrived at the main gate, a guard was stopping a traveler from entering. This traveler argued he had journeyed across the continent just for this grand celebration. Still, the guards refused to budge, demanding to see his official invite. Calian stared at the rejected traveler, realizing this man was exactly who he wanted. Alan Manisel, the legendary wizard, questioned the guards with a calm but sharp tone. He asked if they were truly turning him away over a simple piece of paper. That chief guard stood firm, stating that rules were rules, no exceptions allowed. Alan sighed, noting how Kyrus apparently judged the worth of its guests by their clothes. This superficial behavior was disappointing, but Calian sensed there was something more. It looked as though Alan was intentionally picking a fight. He was clearly searching for any excuse to leave Kyrus. Do you see his game? With a shrug, Alan prepared to leave, but Calian could not let him escape. On Calian's signal, Yan shouted out that by royal decree, nobody could leave. This was a bold bluff, and Calian ordered Yan to distract the guards. While his servant kept them busy, Calian kicked his heels into his horse. Raven charged straight through the gate, ignoring the guards screaming for them to stop. Sneaking out of the palace was highly illegal, throwing the gate into absolute chaos. With the prince riding off, the guards scrambled to chase him, leaving Yan completely stunned. Feeling completely lost, Yan tried to focus. He knew his place as Prince Calian's personal servant. His sole duty was to protect his master at all costs. Suddenly, Jan shouted to the knights. He ordered them to stop, saying Duke Siegfried had let the third prince leave. And honestly, who did this kid think he was, using the duke's name so freely? Untying his hair, the young man let it fall and introduced himself as Shoyan Siegfried. He was the duke's eldest son. Jan told his father there was no reason to laugh. The duke quickly apologized, admitting he simply could not believe what his own son had done. He never thought his son was capable of this. Still, the duke declared that he saw the very son who had left their family when he was still just a child. But the duke admitted it was a good choice. Jan warned him that this decision would damage his standing with the king. The duke replied that he would never ask. Roman simply thinks too much. if the young prince receives any help from their family. In secret, he will be forced to doubt the true intentions of the Siegfried house. If they are not punished for assisting him, it will show they support the prince. That would mean recognizing the friendly bond between their family and the prince. The Bryson family will surely see this as a massive threat. The Duke added that the entire matter would be buried as if nothing had ever happened. Elsewhere, Alan Manessel spoke without turning around, guessing why his uninvited guest was here. He hoped the prince was not there to complain about not being invited. Alan turned around, asking why the third Prince of Caius was pursuing him. Calian had heard that reaching the seventh circle of magic could reverse one's aging process. Looking at him now, he could easily believe it. Calian noted how late it was. Wondering if his guest was about to leave, Alan replied with a soft smile. He explained that while trying to open the closed door, the threshold felt too high. Calian wondered if Alan was going to speak only in vague metaphors. The prince explained that he asked because Alan had been trying to break in. He had tried to break down a door that was already wide open for him. Where did he put the invitation that had been so kindly left behind? Alan joked that he was too busy fighting the wind to wipe the dust off the entrance. Calian did not expect such a powerful figure to make excuses like this. Alan realized this young prince was not apologizing, but actually criticizing him. Talk about being completely shameless, yet the prince was absolutely captivating. At first glance, he looked like a completely ordinary boy. Suddenly, Alan grabbed the prince's arm and asked for forgiveness. Right then, the third prince clutched his chest, feeling a sharp, unbearable pain in his heart. Alan's massive power was flowing directly into him. Alan whispered that even closed doors cannot fully block out the cold wind. Calian realized Alan had already seen the terrible state of his body. The prince admitted his guest was entirely correct. For a long time now, he could not utilize any mana. In Caius, magic users were treated terribly despite being descendants of ancient dragons. The great mage had come here specifically to mock them for their ignorance. They had let such a rare genius slip right through their fingers. Yet Alan was not quite sure if this meeting was merely a twist of fate. Alan asked why Prince Calian wanted to see him in the first place. Knowing this clever man would see through any lie, Calian simply spoke the truth. Calian desperately wanted that legendary name on his side, knowing his life was already in serious danger. Alan already knew the dangerous situation the third prince was currently dealing with. Surrounded by hidden enemies, Alan immediately cast a powerful spell of silence. Safe under a quiet dome, Calian smiled. He knew the truth. He was looking at a legendary seven-circle mage. Alan questioned the prince's motives. Did the prince want to delay the threat or completely rip it out by the roots? Calian answered that for now, he just needed to stop it from happening. But the young prince made it clear that he intended to destroy the source later. He even admitted that if he had to seize the throne to do it, he would. Alan was stunned that the crown itself was merely a stepping stone for the boy. Huge ambitions, but they came from a prince trapped in a failing, dying body. This young prince reminded him of the great Suspanian and clearly needed his guidance. Alan looked at him and demanded the prince offer him a proper invitation. He wanted to see firsthand what this frail royal was truly capable of achieving. Bowing deeply, our hero formally introduced himself as Calian Reincarnated to his new mentor. The great mage Alan accepted the royal invitation, promising to protect him. Later, Yan cautiously asked his father if his identity was truly safe within the palace. Duke Siegfried smiled, assuring him that everything had already been taken care of. He told his son to relax, but Yan knew recognition would ruin his cover. He could not remain by Calian's side if anyone discovered his true noble lineage. The Duke joked about his son's questionable loyalty before Yan asked about his sister, Leo. The Duke proudly shared that she was doing a fantastic job running the family. He added that whenever Yan grew tired of playing the servant to a young prince, his massive family would happily welcome him back home with open arms. But they both knew it would be a long time before they met again. Yan confidently stated they would reunite in just 3 months, surprising his father. The Duke wondered if his son was actually planning to quit being a maidservant. He repeated his question, was his son really abandoning his disguise as a servant? Yan reminded him he was turning 15 soon, but Duke Siegfried had other concerns. He reminded Yan that their household carried the legendary name, the Elephants of Chaos. Even without chasing the crown, their absolute power remained unmatched in the empire. The ultimate kings of beasts, no other creature could ever stand against them. Even top predators dared not cross them, making their family name highly feared. Though Yan treated his own lineage lightly, it carried incredible and unmatched weight. Slayman said his son could choose his own path, but still worried constantly. "Go home, father," Yan bowed politely, dismissing the great duke with a smile. He bid farewell until their next meeting, before quietly returning to the royal palace. Watching him leave, Siegfried sighed at his son's incredibly stubborn nature. He recalled his recent glimpse of Calian, marveling at how much the boy grew. The duke was deeply curious about what the mysterious third prince was planning. On the streets, people gasped. They recognized the carriage's legendary coat of arms. The royal carriage proudly displayed an emblem of 7 red flowers and a silver wand. Rumors spread that Alan's long-standing magic contract with Liberin had officially expired. Citizens wondered how such a legendary figure suddenly ended up here in Kylie's. Without his ties to King Liberin, the powerful mage would have vanished long ago. He figured it had to be that servant. The man stood shocked, wondering if it was true. Had the prince been poisoned? Bystanders watched as Alan Manisel stepped from the carriage. The mage knew his new apprentice had done something incredibly kind. The third prince suggested that his mentor should walk through those open doors. His Highness intended to face the powerful Bryson family, which would not be easy. Alan Manisel realized the prince had waited for the perfect moment to show him off to the nobles and shake up the court. Even the butler was shocked by the sudden visit, but His Majesty was already expecting the great mage. The king asked if Alan Manisel would stay in Kyrus, and the mage confirmed it. He truly needed a place to stay, and the king had already realized that to stand against Celestia, he would need power like the force possessed by Alan Manisel, but who could have guessed he would offer to stay? What exactly was the mage planning? To be completely honest, Alan Manisel admitted he had spotted a black cat with red eyes in the square last night, and it was quite clever. He figured it was definitely worth teaching the animal a few tricks. But since he lacked a proper home, the king curiously asked what he wanted to teach the cat. Alan Manisel replied that he wanted to teach it magic and more. He also planned to build a safe, comfortable environment. Then he added that he would need the king's direct help with cleaning up some nasty pests. The king asked if he could handle it. Alan Manisel replied that if he decided to take Prince Calian as his apprentice, the Bryson family could never stop him. Besides, no one can study magic all day long. If the royal tutor wanted to assist His Highness in other areas, they would not be able to block him. Alan Manisel made it clear to the king that all of this was a direct invitation from Prince Calian. In response, the king agreed to grant the mage a residency. His Majesty admitted he was quite curious since he heard that the boy was completely ordinary and had no real talents to speak of. Alan Manisel was surprised. What did ordinary mean? The boy's fragile health alone was already a massive anomaly, making it nearly impossible to find anything normal. The king pointed out that the boy was also paralyzed by fear, making it hard to believe a boy terrified of horses could ever chase after a mage. Alan Manisel was genuinely surprised, wondering why the king was simply repeating empty rumors from others. The king coldly remarked that if there was anything remarkable about Prince Calian, he would already know by now. Alan Manisel asked the king if he even knew the height of his third prince. The king remained silent. The mage knew he would never get an answer from His Majesty. Alan Manisel remarked that sometimes attention acts like a slow poison, while indifference works as a cure. In this case, he knew being busy was just a poor excuse. The king said he would overlook the rude behavior, chalking it up to genuine concern for his student. It felt ridiculous to explain himself, but he deeply valued the princes. The king added that this was especially true of his third prince, Calian, as he was his absolute favorite. His Majesty declared that their conversation was over. He headed for the door, but the magician stood in his way, blocking it. Alan Manisel flatly stated he was tired of empty talk, leaving the king furious. Who gave him permission to use magic inside the royal palace? The king demanded, but the magician continued. He explained that Calian's lips were dry, his breathing labored, and his skin pale a bluish tint. His nails were purple, and the third prince's clothes had been hastily altered, considering his ceremonial attire had been tailored a month ago. It was obvious that Calian had lost an immense amount of weight during that period. The weak prince could barely open his eyes, let alone get out of bed. He was too weak, the king was stunned, but Manhwa warned that if His Majesty continued to ignore the situation, he would lose the third prince forever. Meanwhile, the maid told Yan that it was nearly noon, and Calian had not even had his morning tea yet. Yan said he would deliver it himself and make sure the prince did not choke on it. Entering the room, Yan saw that Calian was still fast asleep. Yesterday had clearly taken a major toll on him. Then Manhwa, appearing right beside Yan, asked if the prince was still asleep. Yan jumped, startled, demanding to know how Sir Manhwa got in. Uninvited guests were strictly forbidden, and he had to leave, but Manhwa simply asked if Yan remembered who he was, adding that they had crossed paths in Riverine years ago. Did Yan really think that nobody would recognize him now just because he had grown up, calling him by his old nickname? Little Elephant. Yan remembered his father's warning. He was recognized far too quickly. Right at that moment of panic, the young prince finally stirred and woke up. Asking Yan how long he had slept, Yan gently informed his master that he had a guest waiting. Calian looked over, surprised to see his teacher inside his bedroom. Manhwa handed his student a small bag. Confused, Calian asked what it was inside. For special pills, Manhwa instructed the prince to take one every single day. Calian asked if it was medicine. The mage explained that Calian was facing two major problems. First, he could not control his mana. Second, his physical body was rapidly wasting away. Calian was shocked. He had not said a single word. Yet his teacher seemed to see right through him. Manhwa then asked if the prince possessed a sacred blessing. Calian confirmed it, explaining that the blessing granted him a great affinity for magic and self-healing, but he added that lately he felt as though that healing power had completely vanished, leaving him with a weak heart. The magician asked if he had ever considered the connection between healing and magic. Calian replied that he believed the blessing was meant to strengthen his heart. After all, the heart is the absolute source of both mana and life. Manhwa agreed that the sacred power of the blessing did indeed strengthen his heart, and that this protective energy had not actually disappeared from him. There was nothing wrong with his heart, and his mana was not truly blocked. Calian was baffled. What was happening to him then? His mentor asked if he realized the blessing of Suspanian had not vanished, but had instead reached its absolute limit. Something had continuously drained the power of that blessing. Could no longer heal even minor injuries. The prince froze as a terrifying thought hit him. Could it be poison? Manhwa added that without that sacred blessing, the prince would have died long ago. Fighting off such a deadly poison puts immense strain on his heart, forcing the healing magic to work at its absolute limits. In this state, any attempt to use mana would be violently rejected by his own body. Calian was devastated, realizing his physical vessel had been poisoned long ago. The poison had entered his body. This was clearly a highly calculated attack. But why go through such trouble to destroy a child already nearing death? It was a disturbing bloodlust for a 14-year-old. Alan wondered who this third prince really was. Calian immediately asked his teacher if this was an antidote. The young prince wanted to know if this medicine would truly cure him. Alan admitted he worked in a rush, but promised it would work. Still, Calian wondered what would happen if he swallowed both chemicals together. Alan warned that if the prince kept taking the poison, the antidote would only buy him some time. Calian calmly replied that was enough. His teacher froze in shock. Was he really going to risk taking both? But get this, the third prince actually had a theory of his own. The young man suspected the source was the tea he drank every morning. Since he drank it publicly, his enemies could easily verify he consumed it. With nobody else sharing his cup, it was the perfect assassination method. Before, the original Calian must have noticed his failing body and refused it. His sudden refusal to drink was likely what kept him alive back then. But now, Calian knew the entire board had shifted with this poison. He had no idea what desperate measures they would try next to kill him. To survive, they had to keep their knowledge a complete secret for now. Alan raised an eyebrow, asking if secrecy was truly his only motive. Calian explained that if the morning tea was exposed as the weapon, Yan and the other palace servants would face immediate, deadly blame. The mastermind was playing a comfortable, confident game. Alan finally understood. The mage smiled, thinking this brilliant baby elephant would be just fine. Alan then asked what the clever third prince was planning to do next. Calian chuckled, calling Baron Palun a fool who had just overplayed his hand. To force an enemy to show their trump card, you throw yours away. Watching him, Alan remembered his own father. Calian requested his company tomorrow. Meanwhile, the queen marched directly into the second prince's private chambers, furious to find him still asleep and late for his daily duties. And believe me, she was absolutely furious when she smelled alcohol on Plants. Why had her son ignored her strict orders to stay sober? Plants merely glared, demanding to know why she was bothering him so early. The queen snapped back, announcing that Calian had secured a powerful mentor. The legendary 7th Circle mage, Alan Manisol, was now backing him. Plants had to make sure her lifelong ambitions did not go to waste. She ordered him to dress immediately, warning that everyone would be watching. Furious at her words, Plants squeezed his glass until it shattered. Shards sliced into his palm, sending a jolt of panic through his servants. Blood dripped as the enraged prince screamed for everyone to get out. His burning hatred for his younger brother had reached a boiling point. Later, crowds gathered to celebrate King Rumin's grand birthday. All 3 princes rode closely behind the king on horseback. The curious spectators whispered, pointing out the dark-haired Prince Calian. Everyone wanted to get a glimpse of the mysterious boy. Yan looked onward. They looked at the prince, asking how he felt, relieved he looked so much. Better than yesterday, Calian replied that he had rested well, though the young prince knew it was actually all thanks to the antidote. His breathing had finally eased up. And that sharp chest pain was almost entirely gone. He felt ready for what lay ahead. He could participate in the events in peak condition, which was all he wanted. Suddenly something caught the eye of Calian. He spotted a stranger. A mysterious man was hiding his face deep beneath a hood, looking incredibly familiar. Memories flashed back to those final battle moments when a wounded knight urged him onward. To raise his sword, just for a brief second, the gaze of Calian locked with his. Recognizing him instantly, the prince gasped. It was Kiri, but what was he doing here? Why was Kiri even in Caius? Yan was surprised as the horse suddenly became highly skittish. Calian ordered Raven forward, assuming that the restless stallion sensed a presence up ahead. Calian quietly questioned the animal. Raven must have sensed it too. He told the horse they couldn't make a scene right now. Kiri would just have to wait. Meanwhile, Melior Pollen, owner of the Grand Shopping Center, stepped forward to express his absolute honor to serve His Majesty. Pollen bowed, promising a thrilling performance that the king would surely enjoy. Calian realized he was standing before Baron Melior, the man who had prepared the horse show instead of the Brisson family. This saved him some hassle. But even with that avoided, a much darker concern weighed heavily on him. In his past life, Randall was severely injured during this exact show. And as punishment for the tragedy, Baron Pollen was sentenced to hang. Now the unsuspecting Baron was inviting the royals to their special seats. Calian stared up at the massive chandeliers hanging high above them, realizing this was the spot. Get ready, because things were about to get tense. Shouldn't the royal knights have checked this place top to bottom? Given the king himself was attending, any security oversight here seemed highly suspicious. The Fable Knight Corps had been assigned to handle security details. Calian decided he had to give Pollen a real chance to survive. He approached the Baron, pointing out that the heavy chandelier overhead looked troubling. The Baron blinked in utter confusion, looking up at the massive light fixture. What could possibly be wrong with it? Soon, the horse show officially began. As the audience cheered, Pollen felt incredibly lucky to be sitting there. He was finally sitting right beside the king, enjoying what felt like the ultimate honor. Having poured his heart into this show, he couldn't miss this opportunity. Glancing back, the Baron caught sight of the young prince looking up. Pollen suddenly remembered the warning. A cold shiver ran down his spine. Realizing he hadn't checked the ceiling, he personally climbed up to inspect. To his absolute horror, the heavy support rope holding it up had been cut. A freezing sweat broke out on his back. No joke, he was almost a goner. Everything would have ended in absolute tragedy. The thought alone was terrifying. But how on earth did Prince Calian foresee such a hidden danger? Calian watched as Pollen quietly slipped away from the side of the king. The Baron was clearly smart, choosing future safety over chasing immediate royal favor. But why exactly did the Brisson family turn against the crown? Did they really stir up this much chaos just for a Baron? Plank looked coldly at his younger brother, sneering at him to know his place, while the host urged the crowd to settle. It was not over. Plank spat that he felt utterly disgusted, feeling the filthy, pitiful blood of the third prince slowly rising in his throat. The king heard this and turned around, instantly silencing the princes. they all looked up at His Majesty, while Cleon stood completely frozen in surprise. The young man did not know what Plank was scheming, but he never expected the second prince to be of any help. King Roman coldly asked Cilicia how much lower she was going to sink. The queen glared furiously at her son, having warned him countless times before. The courtiers began whispering, shocked that the second prince would dare say such things in the actual presence of King Roman. In that moment, the king realized that after this, he could never back Prince Plank again, wondering if Cleon was a better candidate for the crown. After all, Cleon held the crucial backing of Manhwa. Time to make a choice. The dramatic presentation was over. Randall avoided disaster, but Roman barely paid attention to Plank's uproar. Yet even though everything went exactly as Calian planned, the queen stayed completely calm, assuming Celestia was the one behind this entire clever royal scheme. Our hero knew today's chaos had caught the queen completely off guard. The guest asked the magician if he believed the carriage accident in Karis was simply an assault on royalty. Manhwa then suggested that someone from the outside might be trying to eliminate the prince. His companion laughed, noting that simple plots are never entertaining. Their intense, calculated chess game went right on. The guest pointed out that Manhwa was losing. Did he remember his debt? The magician smiled, claiming he had already calculated every move. Offering a hint, he asked if this setup was not a bit too obvious. It really seemed like the masterminds actively wanted to get caught. After all, if the leader of the second strongest trading house in the entire kingdom was eliminated, the person who stood to gain the most was Renan Brisson, the highly powerful owner of the top merchant guild in Karis. Calian asked his assistant what the Pollen family's most lucrative business was. Yan replied that it was definitely their famous diamond mine. Calian agreed, knowing that if Pollen were to completely vanish, the Brisson Guild would secure absolute control over the diamond market. Calian realized Renan had planned this beautifully. He wanted to grasp the full picture while keeping Pollen perfectly safe. But first, Calian expected a hefty price for saving his target's entire precious life. The young prince told Yan to cancel all upcoming schedules after the grand performance. Yan tried to protest, knowing the nobility would gather at the post-show ball. Calian simply told him that he was far too annoyed by what he had heard earlier, which was why he would absolutely not attend the ball. Meanwhile, the king sat alone in his office, highly disturbed what was going on around him. Manhwa warned that if the monarch continued to stay completely detached, he would lose absolute control. Remarks like the ones from the second prince were never said lightly. Just then, a servant announced the queen. The maid promised to serve fresh tea, while Queen Cilicia quietly wondered to herself if another guest had visited the king first, having heard absolutely nothing about it. King Roman questioned why Celestia came. Coolly, she stepped up with a bold proposal. The House of Brisson would take the fall, completely. The king could not believe it. Surrender over Plank's mistake. Apparently, her son's reputation mattered far more than royal pride. Yet Celestia remained incredibly bold. She praised the chaotic spectacle with a smug grin. Baron Pollen deserved a grand reward for organizing such entertainment. King Roman spoke up. Perhaps she already decided his prize. Exactly, Celestia smiled, confirming His Majesty guessed her plan perfectly. She would grant the Baron exclusive rights to supply the royal stables. The king froze. Was she seriously giving up such a massive gold mine? Unbelievable, yet everything was falling into place exactly as Elon predicted. The queen knew she had to make a sacrifice to save Plank. Elon Manhwa knew her limits. She would soon withdraw the palace guards. Desperate, she would offer what she believed to be a fair exchange. Then she would present a trade she deemed a fair exchange. When that happened, they had to prove that the king was willing to turn a blind eye to what occurred. King Roman agreed to walk into the ballroom alongside Plank that night. Celestia heard that her dear second prince would be absolutely thrilled. That night, the herald announced the arrival of the king and Plank. Walk in, as agreed, the monarch and the prince entered together. Right on cue, Baron Pollen officially received his lucrative new contract. Scandal, every single noble in the hall saw right through the queen's play. Celestia threw away stable rights just to preserve her son's tarnished image. A devastating blow. No one expected the mighty house of Brisson to fold. Now everyone knew the steep price of Prince Plank's freedom. It was clear Prince Calian now possessed enough leverage to pressure her. High stakes, the other nobles prepared to switch sides without hesitation. Meanwhile, Yan asked his master what to do with the flood of gifts. Calian smiled. Seeing Plank and his mother lose influence felt incredibly sweet. But he had zero interest in gathering a bunch of spineless snakes. Send them back, Calian ordered Yan to reject every single sender except two. He kept the gifts from the Mages Association and Baron Pollen, Calian. Reminded him to list every sender. Unwrapping the Baron's gift, Yan gasped. A horse necklace, Calian stared, completely baffled by the highly specific present. This had to be Yan's doing. What did he tell the Baron? Well, Yan admitted he might have mentioned how much Calian loved horses. Quite unexpected, a fancy decoration for the horse instead of the owner. A test, Calian knew exactly what the Baron was trying to do. Accepting this meant agreeing to future cash buyouts, a subtle political trap. First some gold, then jewels, until the Baron paid off his debt. Too rushed, Calian smirked, realizing the Baron was desperate to escape. He was dead wrong if he thought cheap jewelry could buy safety. Calian told Yan to appraise the necklace and send back the cash. No favors, instead, Calian pointed to the ornamental flower on his desk, declaring it the most unique gift of the day. Intrigued, Yan. Yan noted this gift came from the Mage Association. Could such a bizarre creation actually be a gift? The attendant mentioned a note was attached to it, claiming this incredibly rare magical plant came with highly specific care instructions. Calian noticed the strange plant was twitching. It was actually a magical flower that spread glowing pollen before dying, which made it popular among herbologists. Yan wondered if they should return it, but Calian decided to keep it. Suddenly, Calian got an idea, accidentally knocking over his cup of tea. The cup tipped over completely, spilling hot tea all over the place, even drenching the flower. Calian frowned since it was a precious gift, but he wanted to test something crucial. He wanted to check the tea for poison. He dismissed the nervous maid. Calian actually liked the unique plant, and later thanked his master for taking the time. Visiting despite his busy schedule, Manasol replied he had to help a prince, risking his life, so Calian asked to be taken outside the palace. This was the first time the young prince had ever stepped outside the heavy palace walls. It was a long-awaited breath of fresh air. Calian quietly enjoyed the walk. He quietly asked if the king had actually approved of Manasol leaving the palace with him. The magician chuckled, explaining that the king would find out soon enough. He had already sent a note, and Calian smiled, completely unsurprised by the magician's sheer boldness. Before departing, the prince told his loyal assistant he would return by dawn. Then Manasol asked if his student was taking the antidote. Regularly, Calian confirmed he took his morning dose and was already feeling significantly better. He was doing so well that his poisoner was probably panicking by now. This brilliant trap would turn his stepmother's world completely upside down once she took the bait. The bait was set. Manasol admitted he was impressed by the young prince. Honestly, he wondered if Calian even needed his guidance anymore. Calian quickly shook his head, insisting that he could never have succeeded entirely on his own. Without his mentor's timely gift, his secret plans would have failed completely. At the crossroads, Manasol prepared to leave, though he offered to stay if his prince insisted. Calian politely declined, knowing his master had other vital business to attend to. Manasol pointed out that the local Mage Association headquarters was situated just down Tanasha Street. He told the prince he could always find him there whenever he finished. Agreeing to meet there later, the two companions bid each other farewell and parted ways. They rode off in opposite directions. Meanwhile, a local blacksmith shop was buzzing. This was the exact place where Calian had commissioned his new weapon. He purchased a temporary sword from the blacksmith to avoid walking through the streets completely unarmed. It felt decent in his hand. He planned to use it for now. He simply needed something reliable until his special custom order was finally finished and ready. Next, he had to contact Secreta's network. The infamous intelligence network spanned the entire continent, watching every single nation. But these agents did not just gather secrets. They were deadly, elite killers. Every single spy had undergone years of brutal training to become an assassin. Masterminds behind this deadly guild were King Devellin and one other highly skilled individual. That other legendary founder was Bern, who happened to be the prince's past self. Calian walked down Tanasha Street, approaching a building with a dove sign. He knew exactly how lethal these agents were because he originally trained them. He knew he was in the heart of Kylie's territory now. If they recognized him, Making it back alive would be an absolute miracle. His striking features, especially those dark locks and crimson eyes, were just too easy to spot. Stepping inside, Calian found the space was far larger than the outside suggested. A man wearing a dove-gray coat stepped forward, asking if he wanted a pigeon. Calian calmly replied that the birds had not even woken up yet. The shopkeeper shrugged, saying they simply loved their rest, but Calian countered, suggesting these particular messengers had flown from afar, which explained their heavy slumber. He quietly added that this was the perfect place for tired wings to rest. The shopkeeper directly questioned his business there, and the prince replied that he was looking for top-grade feed. The man nodded, saying he came to the right place. But instantly, a cold dagger was pressed against his neck. The shopkeeper whispered coldly that he had not sold any pigeons lately. Talk about a warm welcome. Calian immediately knew this man was a deadly professional. Facing him in this weak, unconditioned body would be incredibly risky. Slowly, he nudged the sharp steel away with two bare fingers, stating that the bird had left its nest to find food, meaning the shopkeeper obviously could not sell it. The shopkeeper stared at him in utter shock. He immediately knew this visitor was no simple buyer. In this underground network, pigeons were code for secret agents. The intelligence network kept its operations completely compartmentalized, ensuring that even a compromised agent could never expose the entire organization. Lowering his sharp blade, the cautious handler demanded to know who sent him. Calian decided to play a dangerous card, using his former father's name. To claim he was a Regression spy, he smoothly replied that he belonged to Nebula. He added that he was targeting the first prince of Calian and needed to feed a bird that had recently left the nest to gather top-tier intelligence. The shopkeeper eyed him closely, then finally gestured for the prince to follow him. He pointed toward a narrow staircase. Calian silently noted the clever, hidden passage. The shopkeeper noted that since the boy was new, they should exchange names for future deals. He introduced himself as the White Eagle, establishing a formal connection between them. Calian calmly offered his own alias, introducing himself as the Red Swan. White Eagle asked what was required. Calian requested one specific item and crucial intel. The operative demanded an upfront payment of 8 purins. Calian paused slightly. Wary, the man had set a price without even knowing what he wanted. Is this some kind of trap? Calian kept his guard up, refusing to show weakness. But the agent simply claimed the rate was flat. Moments later, he returned with the package containing both the mysterious item and the requested documents. Looking over the detailed files, Calian carefully double-checked the data. The White Eagle assured him that based on the territory size, this was accurate. Calian nodded, satisfied with the results, and thanked the operative for the highly valuable intelligence. As he turned to leave, the shopkeeper warned him to tread carefully in this place. The laws of their hidden world were exceptionally brutal, showing no mercy to failures. But Calian knew that no matter how harsh those rules were, this handler was far deadlier. Stepping back outside, he was shocked to see a crowd gathering in the town square. Why on earth were they active at this hour? He quickly slipped away, avoiding any notice. Checking his map, Calian realized he had to cross the bridge, and fast. But a man suddenly stepped forward, blocking his path. Calian frowned in frustration. What was going on here? Why block him now? The man bowed, apologetic. He explained that a funeral procession was carrying the deceased to their resting place. If the young prince was not in a rush, could he wait? Calian understood. Seeing it was a sacred funeral, he immediately got down from his horse. There was no point in interrupting a family mourning, so he agreed to wait. Every land has its own traditions for honoring the departed. In Calian, legend says that if a living soul crosses a bridge while red flowers drift down the river, the deceased will lose their way forever. Back in Regression, a unique flower called Sinistar is planted directly over the graves. During the day, it blooms pure white, and at night it turns blue. Sinistar represents the absolute impossibility of two people ever meeting again. It shows that the paths of the living end. The dead must never cross. Calian quietly wondered if his own brother had planted this flower on his grave, or if time had rewound before he even got the chance. Maybe he was just a wandering soul who had lost his own way. The man thanked him for waiting, letting the traveler finally move on. Calian reflected on his current life, realizing he was now just the third prince of Calian. He mounted his horse once more. Whispering that the departed should rest in peace, he would pray for their souls. Near the procession, a young man watched the departing rider. his companion asked why Arson was so distracted and not paying attention. Lowering his hood, Arson quietly replied that he simply felt the passing rider was a good person. Meanwhile, Calian noted how many signs along the road carried the name Sisfanian: deep sleep Sisfanian, quiet rest Sisfanian, hearty lunch Sisfanian. Soon the third prince approached a building bearing a sign for the deep smell of alcohol Sisfanian. Calian wondered if this was getting a bit ridiculous, so the old reports from his secret agents back when he was Bern were absolutely true. The name was literally everywhere. At the entrance, a bouncer offered to lead the young guest to an open table, but Calian calmly stated that he needed to head up to the fourth floor. Hearing this specific request, the guard immediately offered to escort him upstairs. Leading him to a private room, the man wished him a pleasant stay. Calian had a hidden mechanical device attached to a simple coat rack. He only wanted some secret intelligence from the White Eagle, specifically regarding certain illegal underground dealings happening inside Kylie's. Calian turned the device and a hidden doorway quietly slid open in the wall right before his eyes. The code about reaching the fourth floor of a two-story building actually meant going down. This hidden passageway led straight down into a massive underground basement. Business operating down here was far worse than basic underground gambling. Deep in the dark, they ran a brutal, illegal deathmatch arena. Bloodthirsty spectators screamed from the stands, throwing down heavy bets on their favorite gladiators. The referee declared the match over, announcing Bloody Gerard as the undisputed champion once again. The ecstatic crowd who backed him rushed to collect their fresh winnings, while the thick stench of copper hung in the air. Moving through the shadows, the disguised third prince finally reached his destination. A lawless, savage pit, completely empty of any shred of human decency. The place was horribly disgusting. A man approached Calian, telling him there was an entrance fee. He then called out to a girl and ordered her to lead the guest to room 27. The girl grabbed the young man by the arm, and Calian realized she wanted him to follow her. This girl could not speak, and Calian noticed with surprise that the tips of her ears had been cut off. Clearly, she was not wearing these revealing clothes by choice. Calian looked around and realized all the girls had tracking collars around their necks. Escaping was completely impossible. The mute girl gestured for him to place a bet, and Calian figured he should play along to get what he came for. The arena rules were incredibly simple. A guest bets money, fighters clash, and if you win, your bet doubles. Calian repeated this simple cycle 10 times in a row, winning every single time. Before long, his 3 pellas turned into 1,500. Still, Calian knew he was here for more. He was not here just to get rich. Suddenly, the announcer called for the final match. This was a special main event. Those betting on the white side were backing Bloody Hammer Sean. His opponent today was a supposedly invincible fighter. Calian looked closely, immediately recognizing the fighter. In his past life, this young man had been locked away, forced to fight to survive, until his sister died. Now the referee stepped up to introduce the second combatant. Calian asked the boy in his memories if he wanted to become a knight, but the boy had replied he wanted to become a sword, His Majesty's sword. That was Kyrie. Calian placed all his winnings on the black side. The spectators nearby were utterly stunned. How could anyone do this, risking everything on a fighter like that? Made them think this red-eyed young man was completely insane. The announcer declared that the second fighter had a 0% win rate. He had never won, but today was his chance for redemption. A man sitting at the next table warned Calian that he was making a massive mistake. Throwing away so much money on a hopeless underdog was pure foolishness. He spoke out of pity, urging him to bet on Sean instead, pointing out that the black-sided fighter had a history of 0 wins. Calian ignored him and asked the girl to count all his chips for the black side. The man warned him that when he lost everything he had just worked so hard to win, he would only have himself to blame. Bloody Hammer Sean was notoriously brutal, and the bloodthirsty crowd wanted a slaughter. They roared for a quick kill, which would multiply the payout tenfold. Kyrie ignored the deafening cheers, keeping his eyes on his sister taking the bets. Watching this, a spectator sneered that the greedy newcomer was about to lose everything. Sean smirked, muttering that his pathetic opponent would not survive this round. The announcer finally called for the start of the main match, and the gong sounded. Bloody Hammer immediately charged forward, unleashing a barrage of devastating blows. Kyrie did not fight back, choosing only to block the incoming strikes. A brutal kick to the chest sent Kyrie flying backward across the ring. The crowd screamed for Sean to end the match. Calian closely watched Kyrie's every movement, thinking that, without his sword, the fighter was severely disadvantaged. He was taking a massive beating, but why was Kyrie holding back? He had the skill to easily defeat Sean. His opponent laughed, calling him far too slow. Kyrie exposed his shoulder, intentionally blocking the next strike with. He absorbed the heavy blows, staying upright as Bloody Hammer unleashed a faster flurry. The massive brute roared that his opponent would absolutely not get away this time around. Calian leaped up from his table, yelling for Kyrie to guard his exposed shoulders. Slipping Bloody Hammer's next swing, Kyrie moved with incredible speed to completely dodge the fist. The massive fist hit empty air, and Kyrie countered with a bone-shattering strike. The chest shot landed hard, totally unexpected, sending Sion gasping for breath. Staggered, the giant left his jaw wide open, instantly losing several teeth to a vicious counterpunch. The stunned crowd went silent, totally confused by what they had just witnessed. Bloody Hammer lay unconscious as the referee called the match. The monster-eyed Kyrie won, securing his first victory. While angry bettors lamented their lost fortunes, Calian and Kyrie locked eyes. The two silently sized each other up before the manager approached Calian. He muttered that someone was looking for him, leading the young man straight to the boss. The arena owner smirked, calling Calian quite a talented young man. With 3 prenas, he had just cleared nearly 6,000 gold coins. The boss hesitated, openly questioning if a mere kid actually deserved such a massive payout. Calian countered, saying he expected the owner to at least offer a decent deal. Instead, the greedy arena owner turned out to be far more foolish than he originally looked. Furious, the boss demanded to know who this arrogant brat thought he was. He demanded the kid remove his hood, but Calian calmly and directly questioned the boss. He asked if the boss could truly handle the massive trouble that would follow his unmasking. Serious trouble would follow, but the smug owner just scoffed at the warning. A nearby lackey chimed in, eager to unmask this supposedly special face. Now watch, Calian instantly draws his sharp blade, driving it clean through a thug's arm. As the man shrieked in agony, the entire room erupted in sheer outrage. Calian coldly remarked that he expected them to at least have some common sense. The boss realized he had invited a complete psychopath who was entirely unafraid of violence. Sweating profusely, the terrified owner stammered that paying 6,000 gold at once was impossible. He asked if the kid could wait, but Calian just casually twirled his blade. He declined the massive payout, demanding they hand over the monster-eyed Kyrie to him instead. The boss flatly refused. That fighter was his brand new goldmine. But looking at Calian's cold eyes, he realized he might genuinely lose his own life. No matter how deadly this kid was, he was still outnumbered by a dozen thugs. The boss scoffed, declaring they had no intention of releasing their star fighter. Before anyone could react, Calian's sword flashed, shredding the boss's expensive trousers to absolute pieces. Holding his sharp blade dangerously close, Calian asked what if he took both gold and Kyrie. He calmly questioned if there was honestly even any point in continuing this useless negotiation. Feeling the boy's suffocating, dominant aura, the terrified boss immediately folded. He screamed to bring Kyrie out immediately, while Calian hid his absolute exhaustion. His fragile body couldn't repeat that high-speed trick, leaving him desperately struggling to stand. He had to bluff his way through, but then a frantic lackey rushed in. Kyrie was refusing to leave without Hina, completely catching Calian off guard. He had assumed the sister was already dead after what Kyrie had previously told him. Kyrie stepped out of the ring, still bearing the heavy guilt of failing her. Calian decided he would fetch Kyrie himself, leaving the trembling boss to comply. He arranged for these people to escape safely, just as Calian promised before. But first he needed to collect the entrance fee and all the winnings. Calian grabbed the reins of his horse. Kyrie and Hina followed him from a short distance. Kyrie thanked the prince for his help, asking why he even did it. Calian threw his cloak over the girl, telling them not to be suspicious. He had no bad intentions. Kyrie stared at the red-eyed, dark-haired prince and recognized him immediately. The young elf bowed low and apologized to his highness. He admitted he failed to recognize the prince and dared to show such distrust. Calian told Kyrie to raise his head. He was the one who shouldn't bow. He looked at them, brother and sister, half-elves and completely penniless. It was clear what kind of hard life they had endured in his past. Kyrie failed to protect his younger sister, that habit of exposing his shoulder. in a fight was typical of a self-taught amateur. The prince asked Kiri if he wanted to become a knight. The boy replied that he wanted to be a sword that protects everything, not just a mere knight. Calian handed Kiri a sword, explaining that he couldn't become a knight right away. First, he must serve as his shield before leaving. The prince told Kiri to find him if he truly wanted to master the sword. Kiri asked why the prince would give them something so valuable. Calian replied that it was simply because he needed a sharp sword. He knew this was the least he could do to repay Kiri. Now at the Mages Association, inside Alan Manisol's office, the wizard burned useless papers. How did the third prince know the chandelier would fall? Suddenly, the door swung open and Calian stepped inside. The young prince greeted his teacher. Announcing his arrival, Alan stared closely at his disciple and asked if he had been fighting. Alan wondered where the prince had left all his clothes. Calian replied that he hadn't actually been in a brawl. The wizard guessed that the prince's negotiations had been quite intense. Calian quietly admitted to his master that it had been a very long and exhausting day. He explained that he successfully recruited Kiri and laid a trap for the poisoner. Everything was falling into place, yet the young prince still felt incredibly uneasy. Maybe it was because he had accomplished so much in such a short time. Right then, the young prince noticed a teapot and cups floating midair before his master. He thought that this room finally resembled a proper wizard's office. Alan chuckled and asked if he had expected to see creepy floating eyeballs staring at him, or a cauldron bubbling with some bizarre potion. Calian nodded, admitting things here were far more ordinary than expected. There was even an unsheathed dagger sitting casually on the wooden table, blending in so perfectly with the room that it didn't stand out at all. But Calian recognized that weapon upon closer look. He asked why it was sitting there when suddenly the blade shot straight up into the air. Shocked, Calian watched as the sharp edge hovered inches from his face. He realized it was too late to dodge. Alan calmly remarked that even with a battered body, his disciple's reflexes were remarkably fast. Alan said that it was a powerful magic weapon made by the Suspanians, capable of copying shapes. Another person's hidden weapon. His master, Alan, immediately wondered if this was some kind of warning. Calian realized Alan never actually intended to attack him in the first place. But Calian had reacted too quickly, even instinctively unleashing his aura. Alan said that the prince used to be someone who could not even hold a sword. Their meeting was impressive, but suspicion still lingered in the back of his mind. Even stranger things seemed to happen every time they met. The king remarked that the once horse-fearing prince had suddenly changed completely, which shocked the entire court. Discovering he was being poisoned completely changed the prince's reaction. He showed a fierce, burning desire to survive, rather than a fear of death. That kind of desperate, raw energy only belongs to warriors who have already shed blood before. It was clear an accident was planned for the upcoming horse ride. Master Alan asked for the truth, and Calian hesitated, considering his options. Revealing his secrets and his healing magic could finally answer those who doubted his identity. Still, his teacher was genuinely trying his best to trust him. So Calian confessed the truth. He was actually Bern of Regression. Shocked by this revelation, Alan asked if a time loop meant the real prince was dead. But Bern replied that the original prince was likely still in there. He could still faintly sense the lingering consciousness of the original host. Alan recalled their very first meeting, when the prince made a rather strange confession to him. Back then, Calian insisted he had no desire to take the throne. Now Alan asked him directly, what is it that he truly wants? Bern admitted his main goal was simply to prevent a devastating war from breaking out. He still did not understand why Prince Plants was called the Axis of Time. Unless they found the root cause, the same tragedy would keep repeating. Alan asked if he wanted this for himself or for his brother Chase. Startled by this sudden question, Bern listened closely as his teacher prepared to drop a massive bombshell. Alan revealed that Prince Chase was currently the only heir to Regression. Chase was a concubine's son, and the late queen had never borne any male heirs. This meant that a third prince named Bern simply did not exist in this current timeline. Shocked, Bern realized he was wiped from existence, completely gone from this world. He could not comprehend why this regression had distorted reality so much. Perhaps messing with the axis of time had caused a massive and completely unexpected glitch. Because of that error, his soul was somehow shoved into Calian's body. Yet the original prince's spirit remained alive and tethered to the flesh. If he took over Calian, did someone else take over his own original body somewhere? But in this reality, a second prince named Bern could never exist. To him, this felt no different than stealing another man's entire life. Alan reassured him, saying Chase had already fully consolidated his power as the crown prince. Besides, the past and present Bern knew had already shifted completely. If the past can change, then the future can be rewritten too. Alan warned that the lives of all three Kairos princes were currently in grave danger. He urged him not to worry about Chase, who was fully capable of ruling. Bern realized his master was telling him to let go of his past regrets. Deeply moved, the prince promised to be honest from now on. He declared that his master's fears would not pass, for he was now Calian of Kairos. Ever since he first opened his eyes, he had asked his master if everything would truly be fine, even if he was not a real prince, making Manasal smile warmly at his worries. He had wondered what his student was so anxious about and wanted to be honest. From the start, the person he shared a bond with had been this very same soul. Calian realized that his master already knew all about the mysterious axis of time. It seemed the mage knew about it all along, and Manasal soon explained why. About a year ago, Prince Chase had approached him asking for advice regarding that very power. The master secretly traveled to Esrata to investigate, but discovered only that humans did not create it. Then the mage added that just a month ago, shocking news arrived from Sekresha. This legendary axis of time had completely vanished. A month ago, he had regressed 10 years into the past, right when the relic vanished. This timing was no coincidence, leaving the young prince to wonder about the true cause. What could have triggered his sudden return? His master admitted that nobody had the answer. Even after thinking it over, it remained a mystery, but there was one person who knew. They had to find them, and Calian would soon see the truth for himself. As they approached the monument of Sisfanian, Calian knew his time was running short. The coming-of-age ceremony was drawing closer. This special ritual for the royal family required him to visit the house of Sisfanian. There he would finally declare his royal blood. He would also inherit the founder's will, but Manasal warned him of one crucial detail. To even participate in this sacred coming-of-age ceremony, he had to do one thing. He had to stay alive, meaning the young prince needed to act fast. The dangerous seeds Calian had sown during his journey were finally beginning to sprout. Naturally, his loyal assistant Jan was deeply worried. The mysterious visitor who promised to return had left, swearing to arrive by early dawn. Calian soon invited Jan to see something interesting. Jan wondered why his master had suddenly stepped out onto the cold morning terrace. The prince was quietly focused on a mysterious potted plant. It was a rare plant, beloved by collectors. Once dead, it leaves behind a brilliant, glowing pollen. Since it was rare, Calian wanted to test its limits. With deliberate intent, he spilled his cup of lethal poisoned tea onto the soil. This was to watch the palace servants closely. The poison inside that cup was highly deadly, designed to end a life quickly. Any normal human would die within days, and a regular plant should have withered. Surprisingly, this gift did not wilt at all. It seemed as though someone had secretly replaced the dying flower with a fresh one. Since it was a crucial clue, the prince kept the pot hidden. He knew this resilient little flower would eventually guide him directly to his assassin. He was sure the culprit was Celestia. Turning around, the prince greeted Jan as he brought in the morning tray. He asked if his loyal assistant had slept well, but Jan seemed slightly flustered. Rather, he admitted it felt unusual hearing warm morning words from the prince. Calian explained he simply woke up early. Taking a slow sip of his fresh tea, Calian found the flavor subtle but comforting. Today was different. Celicia had laced his tea with poison again. Calian asked if Yan had a plan to gather all the nobles at the palace within 1 week. John replied that a grand meeting of all the nobles, including His Majesty the King, was next week. A lavish banquet would follow the formal meeting. This made Calian think that this would be the perfect moment to test the poisoned tea, meaning Celestia should prepare to lose her mind by then. After drinking the tea, the third prince took out another pill given to him by his teacher. Yan asked what the prince had been taking. Calian replied they were just bioactive supplements. He explained his body was still a bit frail and suggested heading to the hall. In eating breakfast early today, Yan promised to help His Highness immediately. The loyal assistant stared at the empty teacup and caught himself feeling incredibly anxious, although he had no idea why. After the chaos at the horse riding track, the second prince was absent from the breakfast hall. Calian thought this was actually better. He did not want his plans to be ruined because of plants. The third prince mentioned that the roses would bloom early. The older and younger brothers at the table exchanged silent glances. Soon after, the first prince stood up from the table and left. John asked Calian why His Highness had suddenly brought up roses. Our hero replied that he had spotted one during his morning walk. It simply reminded him of his older brother, Randall, who used to tend to roses. Calian added that it did not matter. Later, after an intense run through the forest, the third prince stopped and clutched his chest, gasping for air. Manhwa asked if his condition was worsening by the day or if he was just used to pushing his body too hard. Calian replied that skipping his training might actually kill him. The teacher then asked where he had been. Calian explained that he had been busy working alongside Roma for a bit. Manhwa asked why his student had summoned him today. Calian replied that there were 2 favors he wanted to ask his master. The prince added that he needed 2 identities. The teacher smiled, noting that this was not a very difficult request. The prince then added that he wanted to investigate the highly suspicious deaths of several noblemen, focusing closely on the cases in Bern that caught his attention. Manhwa remarked that this was simple, but his student was demanding far too much from his old teacher. Calian noted that the amount of poison had suddenly increased. Manhwa asked if the prince had finally found the culprit. Manhwa admitted he could guess the identity. Calian warned that the magic masters would soon start monitoring them closely, though it was tough targeting an archmage. Now was the crucial moment for his master to regain full strength. Manhwa dryly asked if his student truly intended to use him as a shield. Calian replied, not a shield but a weapon. Our hero knew better than anyone else the devastating, highly trained power of those mages. It was a squad of white demons conjured by magic users that had destroyed his former life and country. Calian declared his ambition to establish a powerful mage order. Such a bold statement was highly unexpected even to Manhwa. The mentor reminded the prince that mages were vastly different from ordinary knights. Did the young prince truly realize that training them up was extremely difficult? Calian replied that he had a simple answer to that: it is possible. When Roma announced they were building an order of mages, everyone ignored him, even Bron, but it wasn't worth worrying about, thankfully. Because of that, he was able to keep going and succeed. Yet, shortly after the Order of Magicians was formed, Roma died. He had done everything in secret. Then the mages fell into the hands of Plank, who inherited the throne. The teacher already knew the outcome, and Calian noted this time wouldn't be easy. The young prince figured that the Brisson family would finally step in now. The prince declared he planned to use what Celestia had done to strike a deal. His mentor asked what exactly the queen had done, and Manhwa wondered how. Calian replied that it was still a secret, only promising that it would happen very soon. The prince asked Manhwa to share his thoughts with the king, since his mentor was currently weighing many options. He added that the moment the queen made a mistake, they would seize the upper hand in their upcoming negotiations. Now the maid reported to the queen that she had increased the numbers as ordered. Celestia told her to make sure everything went perfectly. The queen added that whispering voices coming from all sides were highly irritating, and she wanted no part of them anymore. Celestia told her son that the person who should actually be doing the hard work was already sitting right there. Is it not inevitable that they face some hardships now? Plank urged the queen to stop stressing so much, claiming he only came to deliver that message. Celestia snapped back that it was not up to the second prince, who could do absolutely nothing. She insisted that suffering for her son was her destiny. Angry, Plank turned to leave. The queen mocked his weakness, warning the young prince not to get in her way ever again. Soon the day to arrive at the palace came, and Hina was busy with her chores. Her brother noticed she was in a great mood today, humming happily. Hina explained they would finally reach the palace today and get to meet the prince at last. Her brother curiously asked his sweet sister if she actually liked the prince, and she happily nodded. Meanwhile, in the palace, Taylor was busy taking measurements for the third prince's new royal suit. Calian informed Yan when the noble assembly would start, stating they had to reach the banquet hall within an hour. He added there was another urgent task for Yan to complete. Finally, the hour arrived for tea service too. The weakest prince and the queen watched closely as Calian made his entrance. This turning point marked a massive shift. Yan had to deliver two vital messages. One to the Mages Association and the other to the teacher. First, Yan would bring the message to the association, then head back with the teacher. The third prince, Calian, reassured his anxious assistant not to worry, saying he would handle the rest himself. Our hero recalled a similar event from his past, though he dismissed it as a useless worry. He felt confident that absolutely nothing would happen to the prince. Over at the Mages Association, Ira Sarin, the guild leader, assured Manhwa that all preparations were complete. Since quite a crowd had gathered, she kept focused solely on official business. Yet the secrecy surrounding the entire matter felt highly suspicious. Manhwa calmly pointed out that the lesser nobles would never dare interrogate the powerful Brisson family, fearing they might end up as another unsolved mystery. Ira then asked how the prince planned to leverage this delicate information. Suddenly, the door burst open as Yan rushed. Calian entered the room. He addressed the association head, noticing that Manhwa was also present. Jan explained the prince had sent letters to both of them. Reading the message, Elon asked where the banquet would be held. Noted that Manhwa could not possibly attend without an invitation. But the mage countered, no time to worry about that. The third prince could die. Calian warned his teacher he was going to strike a deal with Celestia today, risking his life if things went terribly wrong. He needed his teacher's backing. An hour earlier, during his secret meeting with the queen, Calian noted they were alone, just the two of them. He suggested they be completely honest. Celestia agreed, but remarked that it changed nothing. Loudly slamming her fan on the table, Calian said he asked for honesty, not to discard basic manners. The queen wondered what he meant. Had this rude boy come simply to argue with her? Celestia sneered, already regretting showing him any attention. It was beneath her. He was just low-born, calling the prince rude. Calian said he wanted to talk about the poison tea, suggesting they finally end this game. He was patient, but his throat burned with disgust. Celestia claimed she did not understand what the prince meant, dismissing his strange words as sheer nonsense. The prince simply smiled in response. He had fully expected this predictable denial. Calian revealed a tiny jar of white cubes, calmly explaining that he had to gamble to stop the queen from trying this again in the future. Fortunately, his heart was exceptionally strong, so he was willing to take the risk. The jar held a special poison that would stop the heart. For a brief moment, Calian added that he received it from the White Eagle. This untraceable poison does not react with silver and bypasses all magical detection. The prince noted that since he possessed the sacred blessing, his heart would keep beating, but that divine blessing only works once, while it neutralizes this new poison, the daily poison he had been drinking, will spread unchecked. Calian asked who the people would suspect first. The queen burst into laughter. Did this foolish little prince really think his plan would succeed? This was far from her first time plotting. Everyone in the kingdom knew she was the one who killed his mother. Calian calmly asked what he should do with the cup of tea. Celestia mockingly dared him to drink it. The prince accepted her challenge, taking her words as a direct refusal, and raised the teacup to his lips. Celestia mocked him. Who would dare accuse her? Even the king was extremely cautious around her. There was absolutely nothing Celestia could not acquire. The crown was no different. She simply eliminated any obstacle standing in her way. Step by steady step, she had successfully taken everything she desired. Now only one final, glorious triumph remained completely out of her reach. Now watch, because at the banquet, Calian slowly drank a glass of wine, then suddenly collapsed, losing consciousness. Dark blood poured from his mouth. Absolute panic filled the hall. What happened to the third prince? Celestia watched coldly. The prince was just her stepping stone to climb to power. Voices panicked, crying out to summon a priest immediately. Word quickly spread that the third prince had been poisoned. Could his drink have been spiked? This happened before the king even started his meal. When did the prince drink it? This meant the poison was given earlier. Who was with the prince before everything started? Murmuring voices gradually died down. After all, nobody wanted to lose their head. Queen Celestia smiled inwardly, thinking everything was going exactly as she had planned. Things would be tense for a few days, but everyone would keep their mouths shut. Celestia noticed that just like always, no one dared accuse her. This was her absolute victory. Meanwhile, King Roman rushed to the third prince, holding him close and begging Calian to wake up. He demanded to know where the priest was. Then he heard a faint whisper. Father, Roman froze, remembering how Calian's dying mother begged him to protect their boy. Celestia gasped out that she could not believe such horror was happening here. Feigning shock, she declared she would not stay in the palace a moment longer. The queen calmly announced her plans to head back to her own estate immediately. But Roman turned on her, directly accusing Celestia of trying to murder his young son. The crowd gasped. After all, had not her faction been the first to arrive today? Could she have easily used that early access to plan this sick scheme? If it truly was the queen behind this, then everything made sense to them. She quickly tried to play dumb, claiming she had no idea what he meant. Calian was always chronically ill, she argued, but Roman was not buying it. He reminded her she said the exact same thing back when Freya died. Celestia snapped back that the king could not simply frame her as a criminal. After all, who would ever claim this sickly boy had been healthy? She added that the other princes, who dined with Calian daily, knew the truth. They could easily confirm his state, so she suggested he ask them himself. Furious, Roman roared at Celestia to shut her mouth right now. But she cried out that she was only speaking out of pure concern. She accused him of making a big deal over their son's failing health. Roman exploded with rage. How dare she refer to him as her son? Suddenly, Prince Plank spoke up, saying Calian was actually completely healthy. Celestia glared at her son, furious that he betrayed her. He had ignored her warnings entirely. Just then, the priest's arrival was announced. The holy man rushed to Calian, while Celestia prepared to leave. Ignoring her entirely, Roman ordered the priest to channel his divine powers. But before his hands could touch the boy, a glowing barrier blocked him. Alan Manisel strode into the room, demanding to know why they wanted him dead. Roman was stunned. What on earth was the famous mage doing? Calian needed immediate healing, but Alan warned there was a circle in his heart. He explained that if divine power clashed with a massive mana circle like that, even the luckiest person would instantly die. Their heart would simply stop. Terrified, Roman asked what they could do. Was treating him with magic possible? Alan answered that magic was also completely out of the question. They needed a healer with rare natural abilities. Desperate, Roman demanded another solution. He needed a way to save his son right now, but Alan gasped in horror. Suddenly, the king collapsed. Dark blood spilled from his lips. A spilled bottle lay nearby, as Alan quickly rushed to lift Calian's head. Calian opened his eyes. He called his master. The old magician was shocked. Why did the prince look so terrible? He never thought he would use that. Forbidden spell again. Manisel recalled fragments of his past. He explained that it was a spell to relieve pain, Upton. Outside, the townsfolk noticed something strange. Manuscripts were raining down from the castle windows. People were urged to listen. Hear the cries of grief from the crypt. They demanded the absolute truth. About the Brissons, she slaughtered 37 people. A massive storm had hit. The corrupt family. Suspicions arose that the queen poisoned Prince Calian, and the dark crimes of the Brissons were finally exposed. Public outrage is about to explode. Now get this. Could the insane rumors about Celestia actually be true? Any contact with the Brisson family is now impossible because the king himself has officially named the queen as the culprit. She is a ruthless criminal. Furious graffiti appeared on the city walls. Eliminate Queen Celestia. Manisel explained that Prince Calian planned this to establish an order of mages. They had to act quickly now that Celestia was backed into a corner. King Roma finally understood what the third prince wanted to build. His Majesty agreed. Celestia met the third prince, assuming he was far too busy. She could not comprehend when he had prepared everything. Calian noticed. He could not understand what she was talking about. After all, thanks to her lovely care, he could now rest. The queen assumed the third prince would be on the brink of death within a week, but his voice sounded normal. Calian admitted he had indeed almost died, adding that it would be difficult for them to see each other for a long time. Celestia suggested the prince chain. Calian remarked that the queen should have said that last week. It was far too late now. The young prince was ready to hear her out. He added that he had no objections to what His Majesty the king had planned. After listening to Celestia's proposal, the young prince smiled and said she had completely misunderstood everything. He had never needed the queen's permission in the first place. Did she truly have nothing else to offer? Celestia asked what Calian wanted. He declared that in the lands ruled by the descendants of Cispanian, the clash of swords should be Loud while he was in this castle, he demanded that she get rid of. Commander Pavel, the young prince, was going to strip everything from the Brissons. Celestia was outraged. What did get rid of even mean? The prince knew that Pavel was sent to her by Marquis Brisson to command the royal guard. Losing him would break Celestia's military power. Calian was going to eliminate Pavel, build his powerful order of mages, and regret absolutely nothing. Jan approached the queen, handing over the prepared documents. It was a writ contract containing a seal and an oath. Celestia was furious upon seeing the sealed document. The prince told her she was right. It was magic that bound the contract to both of their hearts. If she broke her oath, her heart would instantly shatter and she would die. The first prince was informed that Queen Celestia had visited Calian. At that moment, the first prince was calmly trimming the rose bushes with shears. The first prince was absolutely certain that he and his younger brother had locked eyes before the fall. Randall remembered the third prince, promising that the roses would soon bloom. Calian had set this entire game up to drag him in from the start. The prince wanted to see how those roses bloomed, so he played along. Calian was safe, though nobody expected Prince Plants to actually back down. There was definitely a deeper game afoot here. The eldest prince knew it. He silently snipped away at the flowers, letting the buds hit the cold ground. Sealike demanded that Calian stop, but the third prince only repeated his warning. If the queen broke the magical oath, her heart would instantly seize up. He calmly added that such measures were necessary, since he simply did not trust her. Sealike glared down at the contract on the table. Calian asked her decision. With a heavy hand, the queen picked up the pen and signed her life away. Calian declared that the deal was sealed, ensuring there was no room for misunderstanding. He softly mentioned that he never really got along with his royal brothers anyway. That day, Plants had not stepped in to protect his younger brother. Honestly, one wrong move, and the king's guard would have ended her right there. Afterwards, Alan admitted he was surprised the queen even showed up. The master teased that Calian's massive appetite was a great sign of recovery. Eating well proved the young prince was finally returning to a normal, healthy life. Still, if Kyrie and Hina hadn't appeared when they did, things would be worse. Hina was an incredibly rare healer, wielding the pure magic of nature itself. Alan revealed that Calian had been standing right on the edge of death. Calian was stunned. He had absolutely no idea she possessed such holy healing arts. In his past life, he had never crossed paths with the sibling duo. By the time Calian met Kyrie back then, Hina had already passed away. Alan stared in shock, realizing the prince had cured the poison purely on faith. Calian just smiled, telling his master that he had it all wrong. The master then handed over the official identification documents the prince had requested. The first registered Kyrie Bern, while the second belonged to young Hina Bern. Since the orphans needed a family name, Alan bestowed the prince's former surname. It certainly did not look like Calian had recruited these two by pure chance. Alan assured him these were legal, genuine papers, not some cheap palace fakes. Melfir had pulled some strings. Then, Alan asked how it felt to be favored. The prince was genuinely taken aback, wondering if those rumors had already spread. The archmage chuckled, because the king had literally just made a massive scene. Calian shrugged, calmly asking his mentor how he was supposed to react. That kind of spotlight should be enjoyed, but Calian calmly shook his head. Calian instructed Yan to clear the table, but the guard stepped forward. Yan softly admitted he had to stop serving, while a child ran ahead. Hurrying through the mansion, the boy peeked nervously around the wooden doorframe. Smiling brightly, the child stepped inside to greet his beloved older brother. Syrian sat quietly on the bed, his injured hands wrapped in thick bandages. Syrian warmly welcomed him, but young Shruan was instantly overwhelmed with guilt. Looking down, the boy softly asked if he heard the summer cicadas. Syrian chuckled, muttering that the loud, annoying bugs were everywhere this summer. The strange, persistent buzzing filled the quiet room, echoing their unspoken worries. They have bizarre wings, and the chirping actually comes from their abdomen, his older brother agreed that cicadas were truly bizarre creatures. Yan suggested that his brother go see them, offering to catch some, but his brother declined, saying it just wasn't worth it since they terrified him. He preferred listening to Yan play the violin instead, but his brother's condition only grew worse by the day. Soon, Yan overheard the adults whispering about his failing health. His father begged the doctor, insisting there had to be some cure. Back then, Yan didn't realize you shouldn't offer hope to someone who has none left. His older brother pleaded with Yan, begging him not to look away from him. He wanted him to look straight into his eyes, never forgetting that he was dying. It was terrifying. Then the entire mansion was suddenly engulfed. In flames, through the smoke, a young man stood outside. A servant begged the master to flee with his son as far as possible as the raging fire grew stronger. And so, on the very eve of his 15th birthday, his brother decided to end his own life. After that tragic day, summer bled into autumn and winter returned until the cicadas chirped once more. Throughout it all, Yan shut himself away from the world, unable to watch his son waste away. His father finally dragged him out of that dark, silent room, yet Yan only stared blankly ahead as his father carried him. Suddenly, the young boy asked who that other child was. His father looked over and explained it was the third prince of the kingdom. He sat all alone by a quiet fountain. In that moment, their eyes met. Back in the present, Yan repeated his resignation as assistant to the third prince. Calian was stunned. What was he talking about? Yan confessed that despite being closest to the prince, he remained blind to so many things, especially the danger. After all, he was the one who served the poisoned tea. Yan wept, blaming his own negligence for ignoring the warning signs and failing to protect him. Trembling with horror, Yan cried out that his highness could have died that day, blinded by his own ignorance. But Calian commanded Yan to look at him, asking who stood before him. Yan softly replied that it was Prince Calian. The prince insisted he realized that he was still breathing and alive. He reminded Yan that he had always stood by his side, surviving only because of his loyal assistant, who refused to ever turn away. Calian confessed he still knew very little about him, yet he trusted that Yan would keep shielding him from harm. So the prince told his companion to stop crying, dry his tears, and rise from his knees. Back then, Yan had told his father he would never return home, because he had finally found someone who truly needed him. Now, Yan declared he was prepared to destroy anyone who dared harm the third prince. Calian looked surprised. Was his assistant truly speaking of raw revenge? But Yan firmly replied that absolutely nothing was impossible. They had made his master suffer far too much. But Calian warned that the elephants of Siegfried must not take action, or else a massive war would break out. Yan snapped that he didn't care about his own noble bloodline. He was no son of Siegfried. Then Yan suddenly froze as he realized Calian had used that secret term, meaning the prince knew everything. He asked exactly when his master had uncovered this truth, and Calian calmly replied, taking a chance. Calian lights a candle over the water, asking if they will completely vanish. Alan Manasel stands in the distance and quietly confirms his fears. It seemed like he wouldn't leave after getting what he wanted. But instead, he vanishes without a trace, leaving Alan Manasel behind. The mentor promises Calian his deepest desire, and Calian tells him to make it happen. If this life was a prison, then Calian deeply envies that absolute freedom. Calian refuses to feign ignorance anymore, admitting there is still so much to prepare. To make this work, he needs to ask his mentor for one final favor. Living this second life properly is Calian's goal, while Pavel's Knight Corps is swiftly disbanded. They return to Marquis Brisson, while King Rumin warns of dangerous royal rumors. Meanwhile, Alan Manasel announces the creation of a brand new order of mages. 3 months pass, and Calian's entire appearance has undergone a massive change. The watchful servants quickly call for Setin, the royal tailor. His clothes have grown far too small. King Rumin greets his third son. King Rumin notices the young prince has grown remarkably tall during his long absence. Calian now towers over Prince Plants. Alan Manasel prepares to present something special. He arranges an unexpected meeting, introducing the mage who will accompany the prince. This mage will escort Calian to Rossite, offering his deepest respects to the prince. The mage introduces himself as Arson Hertz, and Calian's eyes widen in sheer shock. King Rumin explains that Arson is fully capable of joining the prestigious order. He suggests that the two will get to know each other well on the road. Calian finds this twist completely unexpected, but smiles and calls it a gift. Calling it a great birthday present, he listens as Alan Manasel notes the work has barely begun. The Order of Mages doesn't even have an official name or dedicated personnel yet. There is still so much to do, and this is only the beginning. Alan Manasel suggests that King Rumin should choose the name of the order. Surely His Majesty has been giving this matter a great deal of thought. Name instantly comes to the king's mind, Balkan, and Alan Manasel quietly smiles. The mentor knew the king was waiting to say it, avoiding any potential awkwardness. King Rumin is surprised, realizing his wise mentor was the first to voice this idea. Calian turns to Arson Hertz, asking if the name Balkan sounds familiar to him. Arson replies that it is an excellent name, while Alan Manasel watches them curiously. The mentor wonders if Calian had some hidden history with the young mage. He asks if he should intervene, but Calian quickly tells him it is unnecessary. Calian informs Alan Manasel that Arson Hertz was the one who killed him in his past life. But Arson is different now, and situations have shifted in this new timeline. Knowing the future has changed, he hopes that past tragedy might not happen again. Still, the third prince admits he feels a bit uneasy leaving things as they are. Soon, Baron Melpir Pollen enters the chamber to greet the young prince. Calian welcomes him warmly, noting it has been a very long time since they last met. He invites the guest to sit, as the Baron apologizes for his sudden, unannounced visit. Baron admits it is highly difficult for him to speak about this openly. He feels deeply honored that the prince has granted him a private audience like this. But the Baron is desperate, ready to speak frankly and pay any price for survival. Calian gets straight to business, asking what the Pollen Merchant Union actually does. Pollen explains that they recently kicked off a major diamond trade with Tensil and have already sealed multiple exclusive deals with the royal family. But looking closely at the prince, the Baron admits he lacks a contract. That would capture his interest, prompting Calian to ask if he could manage something far bigger than a simple merchant guild. Pollen quickly answers that. With enough funding and reliable people, anything is possible, the third prince agrees but points out they also have to contend with the Bryson family. Surprised, the Baron asks if the prince will be backing him up. Calian chuckles, of course he is in, which completely reassures the Baron. The prince then reveals his ultimate goal, establishing a brand new mage order. Funding and manpower are ready, but the real challenge is controlling these wizards. Pollen wonders if taking on this dangerous task is the price for his life. Calian tells him his life has already been fully paid for, so no worries. Hearing this, the merchant gladly agrees to serve, leaving Calian highly satisfied. His 15th coming-of-age ceremony, which originally spelt his death, has gone differently. His grim fate is shifting, and he now has reliable allies by his side. Next, he must secure the critical oath of Cispanian in the city of Roseth. As guests mingle, the heralds suddenly announce the arrival of the third prince. Stepping forward, Calian receives warm congratulations, knowing his preparations are now complete. He then spots his second brother, Plants, and notes it has been a while. Plants calls out to his brother, openly mocking him as a red-eyed freak. Calian immediately snaps back, demanding his brother address him by his proper name. Plants just laughs, leaving our hero to stare back at him in sheer, breathless shock. Plants points out how Calian now rides horses, wields swords, and acts incredibly cruel. "Who are you?" Plants demands, leaving the young prince completely frozen. Play the part, he reminds himself he is no longer Prince Bern. Nor is this Plants the Mad King who once destroyed his entire homeland. Surely everything will finally make sense once he uncovers Cispanian's hidden will. Calian plays dumb, claiming he has absolutely no idea what Plants is talking about. Wise mentor Alan Manasel notes that Prince Plants is actually incredibly sharp. He warns that despite playing the lazy outcast, the second prince is actually incredibly cunning. Calian is stunned, wondering if Plants's behavior is really just for show. Confirming this, Manasel warns that Plants's deep suspicions are entirely justified. The mentor then asks what the prince wants Plants to believe. After all, the third prince of this kingdom has only ever had one name, Calian. Letting go of Bern is easy, but discarding his identity is much harder. Breaking his train of thought, Manasel suddenly tosses a strange, glowing ring directly to his student. He tells the prince to use it whenever he needs help or deep focus. Calian wonders if it is enchanted, while his master quickly explains the ring's strict limitations. It won't work inside the castle, where Cispanian's ancient magic remains too dominant. But outside these walls, the young prince can summon his mentor at any moment. The master reassures him that his closest allies are completely loyal. Calian nods, resolving to watch how the entire situation unfolds from here. Calian quietly resolves to observe how the situation unfolds from now on. Syrian, commander of the Siegfried Knights, steps forward to express his deep honor. To serve the royal prince, the knight commander announced that he and his men would personally escort his highness to the halls of Sisben, the knights looking. Calian realized who had turned their proud young lord into an errand boy. Jan asked the prince if he needed anything else before they left. Calian asked Jan to bring him something refreshing to drink. The knights showed even more frustration. Calian then added that he also wanted some warm tea. Jan promised to return immediately. The third prince praised him like a good boy, Siegfried's. Knights were absolutely furious. Manasol realized that Calian could make enemies in no time. Calian knew that this was his only shot at winning their ultimate favor. And so began the Rosalita, the grand coming-of-age ceremony. The king mentioned that his youngest son had barely survived his latest ordeal, leaving him deeply worried. Shouldn't Alona have accompanied him instead? But Manasol insisted that the king shouldn't worry about the young prince. After all, the real danger lay deep within the palace walls, not outside. The king sighed, noting the mage hadn't changed at all, and that wasn't any compliment. Manasol secretly found his overly anxious father incredibly annoying. It was hard to believe he had ever managed to act so cold. Calian figured Jan was in the palace, while Jan wondered why he wasn't answering. The young prince heard that envoys from the Tensile Empire had finally arrived, which explained why the palace was so lively. Jan was ready to entertain his master, but Calian replied that Jan was already boring him. All he did was stare at his face for days on end. Jan claimed he tried his absolute best. Slayman told his knights this was strictly Prince Calian's business. Lord Manasol pointed out that the boy had zero talent for magic and possessed only basic sword skills. Simply put, the young prince was as delicate as a fragile flower, meaning they had to be incredibly careful when protecting him. The knights were stunned. Had their young lord the heir of House Siegfried truly thrown away his birthright for this? Jan mentioned they would reach Latrin in a few hours and could rest there, but then something rustling in the nearby bushes caught the prince's eye. The knights immediately drew their weapons and braced for a sudden ambush. Arson noted that whatever was hiding there, it wasn't a danger. Suddenly, a tiny elf tumbled out, crying desperately for help. The little elf introduced himself as Shia, sobbing that he was starving after hiding for so long. Calian asked what he was doing out here. Shia apologized, saying he should have told the truth from the start. Calian realized, hearing the trembling voice, that something was wrong. Calian calmly ordered the knight commander to give the hungry elf some food, but Calian warned the elf that they had been followed by a hostile tail. Sure enough, a rider emerged from the trees. Calian ordered everyone to stay alert and watch the stranger. Urin stepped forward to demand the rider identify himself. The stranger claimed he was merely a simple tracker hunting a thief, asking if they had seen a strange child wandering nearby. Urin replied that there were no kids here and told him to keep moving, but the rider asserted he did not want to fight with elite knights. Slowly, the man dismounted his horse and stated that he pleaded for just a minute of their time to find the child, but Yan flatly repeated that there were absolutely no children around. Calian then asked who exactly the stranger was searching for. The man replied he was looking for a little elf. Calian pulled back his cloak, pointed to the child, and asked if this was the elf he wanted. Calian then stepped closer to the stranger and told him to listen carefully, warning him not to turn around. The prince quietly asked if the figures lurking among the trees were his accomplices. Calian advised him to choose more dependable allies, since those people were actually there to kill both of them. Our prince warned that the second those pursuers spotted the boy, they would fire. Without hesitation, the man turned back anyway, only to see a barrage of arrows flying toward him. But the arrows never hit their mark. They were instantly sliced to pieces. Calian knocked the stranger flat to the dirt, unsheathed his blade, and deflected every single arrow in midair. He dryly reminded the man he had told him not to turn around. Siegfried's knights quickly formed a defensive wall, fully prepared to protect their royal prince. Mage also sprang into action to guard the VIP. Soon, the third prince, Calian, found himself safely enclosed beneath a glowing protective barrier. Arson used his magic to keep the chaotic situation under complete control. Yan ordered the knights to strike the ambushers, but urged them not to chase them deep into the woods. Calian noticed the barrage had abruptly stopped. The hidden archers had seemingly chosen to retreat. Arson instructed the knights to leave the elf boy in his care and keep up with the prince, but Calian did not see a hidden enemy lunging directly at his back. Kyrie screamed out a warning of danger from Behind, Calian whirled around just in time, blocking the deadly strike with his sword. The prince thrust his palm forward, blasting the assassin back, sending him flying into the distance. Seeing that magic, the knights were left stunned, and honestly, so are we. Yan immediately scolded his highness to stop running off alone. It was a miracle that the enemy's blade had missed. Why on earth did he charge ahead when there were countless knights ready to fight behind him? Yan reminded him that the prince knew only basic swordsmanship and was still a novice mage. The worried attendant muttered that one way or another, the prince kept throwing himself into danger, which would surely end badly. Meanwhile, the surrounding knights were stunned. They had heard that the prince was as fragile as a delicate flower, but what flower could strike down an assassin with such brutal power? The disarmed attacker lay defeated on the dirt. Calian grabbed the trembling elf by his collar, stating they needed to have a little talk. The elf panicked and cried out that he knew absolutely nothing, blaming someone named Luca. Calian asked if this elf was actually a thief. The young elf could only mumble tearfully, repeating that he was innocent and did not do anything wrong. Calian told Arson to interrogate the elf, noting the boy somehow answered questions before they were even asked. Arson promised to do his best. After a short interrogation, Arson reported that the elf lived in the forest of Surishi and his full name was Suris. His mother Tree had gifted him that name, which meant the spirit of a neighing horse. He had a close friend named Luca, another elf, who had stolen a treasure from the bandits they just fought off. During their escape, Luca split up, leaving Suris lost and running toward them. Even Suris did not understand why he answered questions in advance. Calian mused that Suris might possess a prophetic gift. The prince thanked Arson and dismissed him. Yan then quietly asked what the prince planned to do next. With the elf, Calian replied that he only planned to drop him off somewhere near his forest, otherwise he might get caught again. The elf asked Arsenal if he could travel with them, but Calian said they would not investigate the little elf's case, stating they must not get involved in this story. Instead, they needed to send a message to the nearest lord so he could take care of the elf. Jan said they would reach the Latran estate by evening, and the lord would be informed. Urian then reported that they had searched the stranger and found something unusual. The knight commander handed over a scroll they had found on the elf. Calian asked if it was among the elf's belongings, and Urian confirmed this, asking if the prince knew what it was. Our hero naturally knew that it was a bottle filled with white cubes, having already tried one himself. After talking to the queen, Calian asked the commander of the knights where the man was now. The captive stood near a tree with his hands tied and said he had assumed the young prince was just some pathetic lord, but it seemed there was more to him than met the eye. Our hero declared he was much nobler than this criminal could imagine. Calian showed him the white cube from the bottle and asked if the man knew what it was. The stranger replied he would love to know himself, having only taken one just in case. Calian asked what they were after, but the man replied he did not know. The stranger added that he did not know those people either, since they hid their faces. The prince suggested that the man did not care about those people. So what did he want? Calian said that if the man helped them, they could try to solve his problem. Calian added that he could be trusted. He was not like other lords and perhaps had enough power to give the man what he wanted. The stranger said his wife was currently in Hansen village and those people knew it. Calian replied that he was willing to provide her with protection. The man explained they were looking for a small ball the size of a fingernail. Without giving further details, only the priests of Tenilla could recognize it. Calian thought, priests, a sacred object. Could they really need a divine artifact? Priests can draw magic from such artifacts instead of divine power. This is one of the reasons why the sacred objects of Tenilla are being searched for across the continent. If the artifact had been stolen, it was only natural that hunters would be sent after it. However, one thing remained unclear to our hero. Why did they need this poison? This poison in cubes is used by Sekresha spies. If their mission fails, he went to the White Eagle because he knew that no one else could get it. The man repeated that he did not know who those people were, but they called their leader by a strange code name. They call him Blue Singer. Our hero remembered that in his previous life, he had asked his father about it. It was one of his birds, a bird he always kept locked up. What could it be doing here? The Latran estate. Due to the evening downpour, the prince had to stop. At first, he thought it was a blessing. The host said it was a great honor to finally welcome the prince into his home. It was Count High Latran, the rain came just in time, a sign from above to look after. The prince, Jan, asked if His Highness remembered the Count and reminded him that the Count was one of those who had sent gifts. Calian remembered seeing his name is right there on the list, but wait, was not his gift rejected? Jan confirmed it. The Count previously backed Prince Randall's faction, but 6 years ago, right after the brutal war between the Great Dunes and Holy Tanilla, he jumped ship to side with Prince Plants. Now, he's desperately trying to win Calian's favor. What a complete hypocrite. Count Latran claimed he had been waiting endlessly for the prince. Waiting with bated breath, apparently, but this news only weighed heavily on Calian's mind. Calian knew that just a year ago, this slippery Count said the exact same thing to the second prince. Now it was painfully clear how he truly treated his underlings. Butler Marsum was nearby, but then Arsene stepped in, apologizing for the intrusion because he had an urgent message. Arsene explained they had intercepted a messenger bird. Calian already knew, of course the greedy Count would try to leak their location to the Blue Singer. Normally, no one sent birds. Out in this terrible storm, the Count was definitely a master of dirty tricks. Latran offered a warm drink, perfect for the cold storm. Calian immediately questioned the Count about why the priests of Tanilla were wandering around these remote lands. The Count apologized, nervously blaming it on having a bit too much to drink. Latran then called those priests arrogant charlatans, questioning what they could possibly want in such a tiny backwater village. He kept rambling about how corrupt and heartless they were, but Calian had heard enough. He quietly activated his mind magic, commanding the rambling Count to fall asleep. The old noble's head slammed instantly onto the table, completely knocked out. Calian muttered that the Count seriously lacked manners. Alan noted that his apprentice, Arsene, had somehow stumbled straight into a dangerous mess involving stolen artifacts and a deadly, secretive spy putting his own life at absolute risk. Luckily, he was still breathing, so Calian wanted to see where this path would lead. Master Alan jokingly threatened to abandon his troublesome student and head down to the warm south instead. Calian just replied that his master was worrying over nothing. If that Blue Singer was who he suspected, she was perfectly safe. Alan grumbled that the prince simply had far too many contacts. Calian countered that in her past life, the legendary Blue Singer never once failed a mission. She must have recognized Prince Bern in him immediately, yet that did not stop her from stepping out of the shadows to fire a deadly volley of arrows. There was clearly a deeper motive. Master Alan listened as Calian explained that he needed to find the priest's exact location. They absolutely had to figure out what the Blue Singer was actually planning with their meeting. Suddenly, the heavy tavern door creaked open and a figure stepped through. Calian casually greeted them, telling them not to mind the guards waiting outside. The sharp woman behind the counter calmly replied that she was not worried. She had no interest in sending her mercenaries after innocent bystanders. Calian raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised by her calm reaction. He half expected her to order a sudden ambush on his men outside, but she simply warned her people to keep their hands off the prince. Looking around the dim tavern, every single patron was slumped over their tables, completely knocked out. The tavern keeper sighed, noting they had done everything completely backwards. Calian stepped closer, asking with a smirk if he had caused this huge mess. She gave a quiet nod, while silently sliding her hand toward a hidden blade. She lay nearby, already knowing this clever prince would never make things easy for her. Calian calmly asked if the young elf she had been chasing was dead. She sighed. He vanished into the thick woods before she could strike. Had she known how this would end, she never would have chased them. It was a messy encounter, but since no blood was drawn, they could walk away. She offered a peaceful truce, assuring him the young elf was completely safe. But Calian just smirked. Did she really think he would leave empty-handed? He had traveled way too far to let her slip away without getting answers. Staring her down, our prince demanded to know why she wanted the divine relics. She was no priestess, so the relics were completely useless to her. The spy set her glass down, locking her sharp gaze directly onto the young prince. With a smirk, she noted that sacred relics fetched an incredibly massive price. Calian guessed she was smuggling them, but she just laughed it off. In her line of work, a steady income was pretty rare anyway. So Calian pressed further, asking if her mysterious buyer was located right here in Latran. Why operate in such a tiny, quiet village when larger markets were available? She could easily find rich buyers among the powerful priests of Sarah's instead. Yet she claimed this specific client paid incredibly well, and good spenders are rare. But Calian knew better, and honestly, things were about to get incredibly tense. She was dealing in top-secret intelligence, using the sacred relics as bait. Trading divine artifacts for the state secrets of Kairos, an exchange Calian wanted to expose. King Lemon grumbled, asking why the Archmage had decided to visit this late. He wondered if the eccentric wizard simply enjoyed keeping his sovereign awake. Alan Manasel calmly replied that His Majesty was always up at this hour anyway. He had no intention of wasting valuable time when there were questions to answer. The mage demanded to know exactly how many Tensel priests were currently in Kairos. King Lemon frowned, asking if Alan knew something or was merely being curious. The king shrugged, assuming the powerful wizard already heard about the foreign envoys. Right now, there were exactly 14 Tensel priests stationed inside their kingdom's borders. The Holy Nation was suddenly recalling almost all of them, leaving just one. They even warned the palace that any future requests for healers would be denied. It was almost laughable, considering they had forced these priests onto the kingdom first. Now they acted as if the kingdom was somehow holding them hostage. Alan Manasel pointed out that a sudden recall pointed to a massive internal crisis. A nation quietly pulling back its core healers is definitely hiding some deep trouble. It seemed they were secretly gathering forces while keeping the public completely blind. They wanted as many skilled people back home as possible before the storm hit. When asked for his decision, King Lemon revealed he simply let them leave. Still, the king found it quite strange that Alan was suddenly so interested. The wizard explained that young Prince Calian had requested their exact locations. King Lemon realized his clever son probably already knew, smart kid, right? Back in the tavern, Calian directly asked the spy if Count Latrin was her client. But the clever blues singer coolly replied that some things were better left unsaid. Calian rushed back to his mentor, only for the Archmage to drop a bombshell. It turned out Count Latrin had lied, secretly harboring a hidden priest all along. And he was selling state secrets of Kylie's to a spy from Regression in exchange. For divine artifacts, Calian agreed that this sounded true and declared that he needed to return to the castle immediately. Calian added that there might be trouble waiting. The Count had drunk way too much and caused a massive scene. At dinner, forcing them to put him to sleep with a spell, Calian remarked, "What if the Count wasn't drunk at all and hadn't touched a drop?" Yan said. That was pretty disrespectful. Calian then went out for an evening walk while the butler said, "It wouldn't take very long." The Count wanted to apologize for his highly inappropriate behavior at dinner, asking the young attendant which way the prince had gone. Yan replied that it was a pretty pathetic attempt at an apology, since when did it become normal for a servant to pry into the whereabouts of a royal person? Yan was genuinely worried about where the prince went. Still, the butler persisted, demanding to know when His Highness would return, but Yan said he had no idea. The butler finally left. Seriously, where were his manners? Then the door creaked open. When Calian appeared, he couldn't help but notice he wasn't getting a moment of peace. The prince teased Yan for being useless, saying he should have kicked the old man out. Yan apologized to his master, explaining that the stubborn butler had absolutely no desire to leave. Calian went right back into the room and shut the door. The butler begged for forgiveness right through the wood, claiming he had no idea His Highness was resting and promised to leave immediately. Yan realized Calian had returned early and came climbing back in through the window. Calian replied that it was a rather long story, then asked if anyone suspicious had shown up while he was away. Yan mentioned that only the butler had visited. Calian had actually snuck out of the window several times already, prompting Yan to warn him they were on the third floor. Calian asked why his attendant was so incredibly worked up over it. Yan sighed that Calian never listened to him. Still, as they had agreed, he immediately told the butler that the prince was out walking. However, the butler kept fishing for when the prince would return, showing way more interest in the exact time than the location itself. Calian suggested that the Count was starting to worry that someone was poking into his private business. Calian relayed this theory to his mentor, and Alan confirmed they were absolutely right. The Count was perfectly sober during that dining room scene. Calian asked why the Count needed to put on such a show. His mentor explained it was a classic ploy to divert attention from his deal with the blues singer, which was supposed to take place that night, which also explains why she showed up in the first place. The wine was meant to serve as an easy excuse for the Count to slip away. unnoticed, but his grand plan failed when he was put to sleep by a spell. It all sounded highly convincing, but one big question remained: why was the Count so desperate? To get his hands on those divine artifacts, Calian suggested that it was the perfect gift for the Count to win over the Holy Kingdom of Tencel, which was the homeland of Randall's mother. To sum up, the Count maintains close ties with Randall's faction while simultaneously playing games with Plance's faction, all while showering the third prince with gifts. Behind everyone's backs, his mentor added that the Count had also leaked state secrets of Kylie's to Sekresh's spies. Calian felt that fate itself had brought him together with that boy, leading him to the clues. His former hunter pointed him directly to the Blue Singer. From her, he learned everything. He learned that Latran had sent the divine artifacts to the Holy Kingdom to win support. They wanted to win over the first prince, so Calian decided to expose them all. Count Latran yelled that he should have known there would be trouble with the prince. The moment the gifts were returned, it was obvious that boy had cast a spell. Only powerful magic could put him under like that. All his plans were completely ruined. All because of this single boy. The Count fumed that the prince was acting too arrogant. He only had confidence because the Archmage backed him up. The kid did not deserve this. He was no real prince. Why did Celicia not destroy him before this? The Count grumbled about the fortune he spent to buy the favor of Marquis Britain. Now all his connections with the high aristocracy would be completely ruined. He had been promised a wealthy estate quite close to the capital city itself. But the Queen's massive scandal ruined everything. Frustrated, the Count barked at his butler. The servant had just entered. He asked if they had contacted their secret ally. The old man admitted they had not yet, but expected a response very soon. This only enraged the Count further, prompting him to hurl a glass at the butler. He screamed, asking if the useless old fool could do anything right. Outside, it poured. A heavy storm meant the annoying prince would have to stay another night there. The butler quietly suggested postponing the deal, but the Count shot the idea down. They had absolutely no choice. They could not risk anything while guests were present. With the prince and his guards around, they had to delay their secret deal. He would send a message to postpone it, then teach that brat a lesson. That would finally put him in his place. Later, the two sat down for dinner. Latran stared at the young prince, thinking his calm, peaceful mask was utterly fake. In Kyrus, the title of Count held massive weight. The nobility would stand with him. They would riot if they discovered magic had been used against a noble lord. Royal blood would not save the boy. Latran knew the prince was just foolish. Soon he would be begging for mercy. The Count offered a fake apology instead. He begged forgiveness for his behavior last night. Calian calmly dismissed it. It was no big deal, the prince said. The Count then asked about the spell. Calian admitted he used magic to put him to sleep for crossing the line. But it was water under the bridge now, so they should just move on. After all, the Count was merely a provincial lord. He was not used to royalty. This was probably his very first time hosting a prince. He was just excited. Latran agreed he had overreacted, though he was deeply insulted inside. He was deeply puzzled by the magic. The Count realized this kid was dangerous. The prince was exceptionally cunning. In the end, only the host looked foolish. Then the third prince mentioned he was exhausted from dealing with the ambush. The Count feigned ignorance, asking if he meant the heavily injured man upstairs. Calian confirmed it, adding that they had uncovered some highly interesting secrets. Hearing this, the nervous Count immediately wanted to know more. He knew he had to find out. The prince then mentioned a name. It was a rare species of bird. Calian noted they needed more details. But he was quite sure the Count would find it extremely fascinating. Hearing about the chaos spreading across his territory, Count Latran declared he was ready to do everything within his power to help Calian and protect him from any danger. But behind that fake smile, Count Latran was desperately plotting how to get the prince away. Yan whispered a quick update into Calian's ear, and the prince casually told the Count that he was incredibly lucky. Left sweating, Latran wondered what other secrets the prince had uncovered. Calian then cold-heartedly announced that their prisoner was finally ready to talk. With their guards in tow, they descended into the dungeon. Latran felt this filthy place was beneath his dignity, wondering why Calian dragged him here. Calian read his mind easily, but the trap was already sprung. Checkmate. Behind the bars sat a man who had been searching for the little elf. Calian reassured him that his family would remain completely safe, just as he had promised. The The prisoner quietly asked why they had come down to see him then. Calian calmly stated that the man faced execution for trying to assassinate royalty. Once this investigation wrapped up, he would be sent straight to Kairos. There he would face a public hanging, but even if he survived that, his festering, untreated wounds meant his days were already numbered. Then Calian threw out an unexpected lifeline, a chance to escape. He offered the prisoner a fresh start far away, complete with land, and a cozy, quiet home to live out his days with his wife. Naturally, the young prince made it clear this deal required cooperation. If the prisoner helped them, his crimes would be wiped clean. Desperate, the man agreed immediately, asking what he needed to do. Calian explained that the merchant known as Blue Soul was actually a spy who came to sell illicit goods. The prisoner admitted they were old acquaintances, but harboring a known foreign spy was a highly dangerous game. Calian agreed, noting that harboring spies was an unforgivable offense. An exception only applied to double agents, otherwise in Kairos it meant death. The prince then turned to the count, casually asking if Latran agreed. Now watch closely, this is the moment the tables turn completely on Count Latran. Suddenly, Latran's butler fell to his knees, begging the prince for mercy. He wept that he was only obeying his master's direct commands. Calian knew the count would crumble, but this unexpected betrayal caught him off guard. He quickly asked the trembling butler if he was actually a priest of Tensel. Only the priesthood was trusted with transporting highly sacred relics. But hearing this, the count suddenly realized the prince had uncovered his deepest secret. The butler cried that the holy temple would execute him if they found out. He had been selling off their sacred relics. Calian was genuinely stunned. He had actually sold them. Wasn't he supposed to be collecting them for Tensel? The prince demanded to know the identity of the mysterious buyer. With desperate haste, the butler babbled that the buyer was Queen Silica's own brother, Viscount Lenin Brisson. He was the one offering the stolen relics to the temple. Lenin had been trying to buy Tensel's favor for years. He had even betrayed the second prince to join Randall's faction. This meant he had completely betrayed his own sister, who would do anything for her son. Not just the throne, but his entire family. Calian tells his teacher their trap caught a monster. Monster indeed. Ellen warns that this will inevitably trigger massive unrest. She suggests talking to the king first, and Calian completely agrees with her plan. It's for the best. The prince asks Ellen to write to Count Latran on his behalf. Next, Calian orders Durin to tend to the prisoner's wound down in the dungeon. The injury is severe. Without proper treatment, the prince warns, infection will set in. He could lose his arm. Once claimed, the prisoner must take his medicine. Calian holds out a white cube. Durin nods, promising to do as he is told. Next, the prince orders Carrie to head to the village and locate the prisoner's wife. She needs to be brought somewhere safe. Just then, an elf quietly enters the room. He greets them, mentioning that Hina came to Klein while he just wanted to see the bird. The elf admits he knows everything, but he really does not want Hina to get punished. Calian is caught off guard. He has not even had a chance to ask anything yet. He figures this elf is Arsen's problem, not his own. Meanwhile, the elf happily greets the caged pigeon. Yan asks what they should do with the little messenger. Does the prince want to keep it? Calian says he is just waiting for the perfect moment. He intends to return it to its owner, promising Hina he will buy her another bird. As soon as they get back home, he tells Hina that this bird flies tonight. Hina smiles, saying it is no big deal. After all, Marilyn might hate having it around. Calian kindly asks Hina to release the bird right after they finish their dinner. He also tells her to leave the windows wide open. They are expecting a guest. And right on cue, their quiet guest slips onto the porch in the pitch-black night. She arrived much earlier than expected, dryly mocking how touching his little blackmail letter was. He basically wrote that she had to come if she wanted her secrets kept safe. Otherwise, the folks on Tash Street would find out exactly what she did. The guest is none other than the blue-haired singer, who guesses he has a reason to blackmail her. Calian gets straight to the point. He needs solid proof that Count Latran is dirty. Specifically, proof of the Count selling sacred relics. Only then will her secret stay safe. The beautiful singer narrows her eyes, admitting that she absolutely despises complicated situations. And that is her final answer. In a flash, she launches a sudden attack. Calian instantly recognizes the magical projectiles. The young prince is genuinely taken aback. The singer he knew was a swordsman, not someone who relied on hidden weapons. A massive explosion tears through the veranda, reducing the wood to complete splinters. Calian asks if she truly wants him dead. What other dirty tricks is she hiding? The woman draws her blade, stepping closer as she coldly claims she has nothing left. Calian blocks her heavy strike with his own sword, analyzing her movements instantly. Her blade is just ordinary steel. It will never survive against his raw aura. He must end this quickly without using his aura. With a swift flick, Calian disarms her. The blue-haired singer is left completely defenseless as her weapon clatters away. But wait, something sharp glints between her fingers, catching Calian completely off guard. So much for having nothing left to hide. Her follow-up attack is blindingly fast. Without unleashing his aura, there is absolutely no way he can dodge this unscathed. He swings his blade, barely parrying her strike in the nick of time. The woman gasps. Is she really facing a master swordsman? It makes no sense. With her back against the wall, Calian asks his unarmed opponent her next move. Calian called her by name, Isla. The woman froze in sheer disbelief. She demanded to know who he actually was, but Calian simply grabbed his rival by the face. Gripping her jaw, he asked if she really did not have a suicide poison. After all, were not the spies of Regression forced to keep it on them at all times? Shoving her back, Calian ordered the trembling spy to start talking, tell him everything. Isla weakly asked if he would actually set her free if she gave him the answers. Calian knew that the agents of SC Crata were famous for their incredible endurance. Yet she was a soft exception to that harsh rule. Perhaps she was not the ruthless shadow he once remembered, or something had completely changed her. Striking back, Isla warned him that letting her walk away in peace was his only option. She pointed out that his sword looked far cruder than even a common guard's weapon. Despite his master-level swordsmanship, he seemed desperate to keep his legendary abilities hidden. Isla quickly proposed a quiet deal. If he let her go, his secret would remain safe. Otherwise, she would run straight to the knights and expose everything she had just witnessed. In her past life, the girl had been a fiercely loyal and deadly agent of Regression. A truly formidable swordswoman, a warrior who had dedicated her entire soul to the blade. But now she was unrecognizable. Annoyed, Calian suddenly grabbed her by the shirt. If she valued her survival so deeply, she was making a fatal mistake by threatening him. Calian threw her aside, warning her that she must never expect to see his face again. His dangerous secrets were simply not worth using as some cheap bargaining chip. He demanded that the blue-eyed singer tell him everything now to save her own skin. Calian coldly added that someone else would handle the questioning now. Someone like the White Eagle. Meanwhile, Count Latrin was absolutely furious in his manner. Where on earth had his useless butler Malcolm vanished to in this crisis? First, those annoying mercenaries showed up, and now this highly threatening blackmail letter arrived. It demanded he prepare a defense strategy if he wanted to maintain his innocence. Otherwise, the mysterious writer would present his own damning version of events directly to the Queen. No matter what kind of dangerous corner he had painted himself into, he was doomed. But the most terrifying part of this message was the signature at the bottom. The sender of this terrifying threat was none other than the legendary archmage, Alan Manassel. Latrin realized the mage had uncovered his illegal divine artifact trades. The fact that the wizard sent this letter meant he likely knew absolutely everything already. Still, the Count refused to let himself be broken by petty blackmail. He would not grovel before some young kid who was merely pretending to be a prince. The proud Count was not about to roll over and surrender his entire life's work. He had carefully planned a secure emergency escape route before touching this illegal trade. Standing at the threshold of his secret vault, he stared at his glittering hoard of treasure. All his grand plans completely ruined by the interference of one arrogant royal brat. Walking over to a hidden cabinet, he pulled out a heavily locked wooden box with trembling hands. Inside rested a massive pile of glowing white orbs that resembled perfect pearls. With these legendary relics, he could easily rebuild his vast wealth somewhere else. He had genuinely hoped his deal with young Renan would make him incredibly rich beyond belief. Instead, that miserable young merchant had brought nothing but endless trouble to his doorstep. Suddenly, a calm voice spoke up behind him, offering a sincere word of thanks. The Count spun around in horror, only to find Arsene Hertz smiling directly at him. Right before him, Calian realized an invisibility spell had been cast. The young wizard introduced himself as the magician serving Prince Calian, revealing his name was Arsene. He had no idea how to thank the Count for securing such undeniable proof, especially since he got it himself. Alan assured his lord there was no need to worry. The third prince would definitely learn just how much the Count helped with the investigation. The box held the sacred artifacts Latran had hidden, and Alan revealed. He also obtained a full record of the Count's shady dealings. With the Blue Singer, along with a list of the kingdom's secrets, he sold off. Calian praised the brilliant work, knowing this would save them a lot of trouble. Just then, Jan entered the room to report that a crowd was gathering outside. Calian looked out the window and saw countless horsemen. They were none other than the Kara, the king's elite personal guard. The prince was stunned since they were supposed to be protecting the king in the capital. What brought them all this way? Alan was equally shocked by the king's move. Why dispatch his absolute best to Latran instead of sending standard royal knights? The king believed the mission was too dangerous for the standard knightly order. He couldn't risk it, knowing spies of the Bryson family had infiltrated their ranks. He made it clear that those loyal to another power never deserved his trust. Alan realized the king was fully aware of the plot, but worried for the prince. He warned that such obvious royal favor only painted a bigger target on Calian. It would stir up his jealous brothers and trigger a massive power struggle. Wasn't that exactly why the king had stayed so distant in the past? But the king assured him he knew what he was doing from now on. And trust me, breakfast with his jealous brothers was going to be chaos. The king wanted to see firsthand how the rival siblings would interact together. Back at the estate, the butler asked if Calian was leaving so soon. Calian nodded, leaving Kyrie to wrap things up and escort the prisoners to court. They would face royal justice in the capital, though one traitor was already gone. He died before his trial could even begin. Meanwhile, Norton, the manipulated victim, was quietly released and allowed to return to a peaceful life with his family. On paper, he was dead, allowing him to quietly retreat to his estate. As Norton left with his wife, the old butler nervously asked about his own fate. Calian acknowledged that crippling debts had forced the butler to serve Count Latran. Yet that didn't excuse his involvement in smuggling highly forbidden divine artifacts. The old butler bowed, fully admitting the gravity of his terrible crimes. However, Calian noted that the butler played a vital role in catching the traitor. Because of his help, the royal family would offer him a second chance. In exchange for absolute loyalty, the young prince offered him full mercy. From this moment on, the old man would serve as his personal estate butler. With the trial settled, Calian set off toward the mysterious chambers of Suspanian. Along the road, word reached him of Count Latran's absolute ruin. The noble was stripped of his title and sentenced to life imprisonment. Meanwhile, the deceitful blue-eyed singer faced her final judgment on the scaffold. As Calian walked, he noticed the cobblestones were covered in bright Renacita leaves. Though they shared the shape of normal foliage, these leaves were completely magical. Actually, the sharp spines of the Rena cactus adapted to draw in moisture. They are layered across the capital square, so the white tiles do not get stained with blood. Plants realized his older brother was testing him. He wanted to know if their mother had any ties to the woman who attacked Calian. Plants insisted that his older brother's suspicions were completely unfounded. Randall noted that since Calian's departure, the second prince had entirely abandoned the wine. Plants was quite surprised. Did his brother miss his drunken breath? Randall coldly replied that now those drunken days were finally over. It was time to learn to stay quiet. Plants grew angry and threw the fork he was holding onto the floor, demanding to know if he was still not quiet. Enough, Urine warned our hero of the extreme risk as Calian saw a landslide. It collapsed ahead from the storm, blocking their path. The prince asked his knight captain how long the cleanup would take. Urine suggested they take a detour. Calian privately noted he had already spent way too much time in Latran, and now this sudden disaster threatened to delay their entire journey. Calian resolved to establish a portal once they returned to Kylie's. Kyrie suggested that the prince accompany him to the hidden elf village. Kyrie suggested they stay in the village overnight and depart by morning. Cran admitted that this was the first sensible suggestion he had heard from the elf. The group agreed to head toward the sanctuary. Cran remarked that the elven village was a highly unusual place, never imagining he would ever set foot there. The local elves soon approached the travelers, with one demanding to know who ruled the humans. Cran snorted, replying that was a grand title, but no one of such rank was present. He added that he was simply the eldest of their small traveling party. The elf introduced himself as Jur, the respected elder of the village. and stated he wanted to ask a vital favor of the human leader, Calian. Introduced himself as Calian Reign series, demanding details before giving any firm answer. Jur explained that 3 elves from their village had recently ventured to a nearby human town, but they had failed to return. Even after 10 days, they were gone, and the scouts sent after them also vanished. Jur begged for assistance, explaining that the forest elves knew next to nothing about the human kingdom. Calian quietly watched the elder, thinking he was being incredibly pushy. Were all elves this demanding? He bluntly questioned why he should help. Jur countered that he was the human king. Calian sighed, noticing this persistent elf was just repeating himself over and over. He clarified that he was not their king, but merely Prince Calian, adding that kings and princes live in entirely different realities. Elder Jur declared that he would never ask such a massive favor without offering a worthy reward. In return, after all, their travelers were heading toward the Siegfried estate. Jur pointed out that traveling by normal human roads would take a massive amount of time. However, the elves knew hidden forest shortcuts. Cran calculated that their journey would normally take around 2 months of travel. But with these secret elven paths, reaching the Siegfried lands would be cut down to just 2 weeks. Calian agreed to find the elves soon after. Urin reported to the prince that they found no traces of any slave traders. The trade the prince mentioned, this forest borders 2 specific cities, Nura and Stein. They found plenty of mercenaries, but none seemed linked to criminal activity. Calian was relieved by the news, though Cleon still suspected that the missing elves had been captured by slave traders, even if the truth lay elsewhere. With the real cause still unknown, the prince suggested searching the nearest towns first. Stein is directly on their route, and both cities are roughly the same size, so visiting the closest one makes the most sense. Ern pointed out the fierce rivalry between them. After all, their lords are nearly the same age, but Calian just smiled, noting that a little healthy competition drives progress. First, though, they need to find a new sword in one of these local markets, but a merchant claims they do not have a single blade left. This shocks Calian, a weapon shop, yet they are completely out of swords. Cleon chimes in, explaining that they are just a traveling mage and a mercenary. Still, weapons are not just for soldiers. The blacksmith sighs, telling these strangers they are wasting their breath. Every single weapon is secretly sent to the mercenaries at the castle. Every merchant's stock has already been confiscated. If they want a deal, they will have to try the fortress itself. Cleon sighs, they are not looking for castle deals or rewards. He just needs a blade for his own use. Calian suggests checking Nura on the other side of the woods instead, but the blacksmith warns that it is useless. Cleon has a realization. Both rival lords are hoarding weapons and mercenaries. War is brewing, and things are about to get incredibly messy. Now, the mysterious actions of the elf elder caught between these rivals make perfect sense. Calian immediately orders formal letters sent to the lords of Stein and Nura. This sudden royal interference should stall their war plans and buy the lost elves crucial time to flee. Calian coldly informs the elder Shero that his group will depart at dawn. The elves must keep their end of the bargain and guide them safely through the forest pass. Calian warns that while he can overlook many things out of respect for their race, the elder crossed the line by deceiving him. Though he knew war was coming, as it happens, those 5 missing elves actually went to Stein Castle to trade as merchants, even the average villagers. The village, everyone knew war was coming. There is simply no way their leader was completely in the dark. Calian realizes Elder Shero was just playing him the whole time, knowing the prince would be forced to step in and stop the war. Because of this manipulation, Calian cancels their agreement completely, but Shero begs him, asking if he will really just stand by and watch his own kingdom burn. Cleon steps in, stating that people do not start wars without a deeper motive. If the elder truly cares about protecting his people, he should use strength, not desperate lies and manipulation. Later on, Kiri points out that the real issue stems from the wealthy Barrison merchants, whose supply caravans usually brave these wild roads. However, they have halted entirely due to the chaos at the Latran estate. Calian suspects this Lannan Barrison is intentionally pulling strings because the poor soil in Stein and Nura makes it impossible to harvest their own wheat, leaving them entirely dependent on outside traders. So when Barrison stopped selling, the desperate people of Stein marched on Nura to buy wheat and survive the winter, but Nara demanded a completely outrageous price. This sparked a major conflict. The prince noted they first seized the entire food market and then shut it down with total impunity. Did they honestly think this would boost their pride? Did they not realize that in the end, it would cause starvation and death for the people, not the Lord? Elder Shur bowed his head and begged for forgiveness. The elf explained that Luca had dragged them into this. Because of this, a brutal war had broken out between the cities. He could not tell the truth because he feared how the prince would react. Shur admitted that Luca was his son. The lost elves were somehow connected to him. The elder desperately hoped that the prince would forgive both him and his son. Shur knew he was asking for too much, but they needed help from the prince. The elf added they simply lacked the equipment to handle this situation alone. Kian instructed the elder to go to the lords and deliver those letters. The prince decided to see what else they needed besides wheat. He would meet with the lords after the elder returned with the information, our hero added. He was not doing this to help Shur. The elder replied that elves keep their promises sacred and would never forget this. The prince contacted his mentor through the ring, saying it was time to clean house. Barrison was becoming a nuisance. Mari's Evan Barrison is the head of the powerful Barrison family. An assistant asked if his lord would return home immediately after the meeting, suggesting they wait for the carriage, but Barrison replied there was no need. The Marquis added that he would stay behind and ordered his guests to be shown to the study. The assistant thought the Marquis seemed different today. What guests was he even talking about? They were not expecting anyone. Besides, the Marquis never missed council meetings. He always preferred receiving guests in the drawing room. Right then, a carriage rolled into the estate grounds and stopped right at the main entrance. Who could it be? Ellen Manisel noted that they had not yet met in person. Marquis Barrison agreed, adding that if the magician had actually scheduled a meeting, the reception would have been properly prepared. Manisel explained that he arrived unannounced to spare his host any unnecessary trouble. Manisel claimed to have something of interest to the Marquis regarding his second son, who had taken a strong liking to the son of the king. The Marquis replied that Renome would never have the courage to dare such a thing. Manisel noted that Evan Barrison clearly did not think very highly of his own son. The guest added he had something far more convincing than the verdict of the Marquis. The Marquis examined the papers provided by Manisel and asked what the magician meant by all this. Manisel suggested that the Marquis had long since decided to get rid of Renome. Barrison declared that this was no place for a mere court magician to meddle. Manisel replied that it was highly amusing to hear such words from a common thug. The Marquis was outraged. How dare this magic smith insult him in his own home? Those who master the sword turn their anger into a weapon as sharp as a blade. Manisel replied that those who had mastered the secrets of magic were just as deadly a threat. The Marquis could try to turn fear into his greatest weapon, the primal fear. Every living creature carries a hidden weight within them, no matter where they decide to go. Manisel warns he is not as eager to fight as his aggressive student, but the Marquis would do well to remember his manners for his own safety. As the Marquis tries to calm down, Calian notes his impressive resilience. Barrison did not withstand an 8th Circle mage's aura by sheer luck. This master swordsman cannot be underestimated. Manisel then offers a different perspective. He has no doubt the Marquis can handle his son, but suggests a better option. There is a subtle way to quietly distance Renan from their family. Calian had already instructed his teacher to offer a targeted business proposal. Their current strategy is to suggest that the prince wants to buy their merchant guild. Ever since the queen was exposed for the poisoning, their guild suffered massive losses. The failing business only stays afloat because Renan is keeping it alive. But the Barrisons are first and foremost a proud house of elite knights. This secondary trade guild was founded by a second son with absolutely no talent for swordsmanship. His father is likely already plotting a way to quietly discard the guild. It has ceased to make money and only stains the honor of their entire family. Still, Marquis Barrison asks why they should play right into the prince's hands. Why deliver such a massive advantage? Manisel already knew he would ask this. The trick is that the buyer will not be the prince at all. Calian made it clear he never planned to purchase the business personally. They already have a perfect candidate. Marquis Barrison demands to know their identity. Manisel names the wealthy leader of the second largest merchant guild in Kairos. This direct competitor has more than enough motivation to target his biggest rival. All the Barrison family needs to do is fabricate a believable reason to sell. The mage notes that the buyer will offer highly favorable financial terms. Meanwhile, a man tending to his plants reflects on Count Latrin's sudden arrest. It is highly annoying, but his own grand plans remain completely safe. Surely the Count kept quiet. Suddenly, he spots a mysterious hooded visitor approaching. Before he can react, the homeowner is violently ambushed and captured. Wild rumors immediately begin to spread like wildfire across the capital. Whispers claim the Holy Kingdom of Tencel has secured priceless divine artifacts. This massive heist would have been impossible without Renan Barrison's direct help. Behind iron bars, Renan desperately screams that his father will avenge this. Shortly after his arrest, Renan suddenly vanishes without a single trace. Marquis Barrison initially suspected Manasol and Prince Plants, but they clearly have clean hands. With that distraction, the guild acquisition moves forward quickly under Melper's supervision. Every detail is managed. Manasol reports that their plans are progressing smoothly. Artifacts requested by the prince have already been dispatched to him safely. Now inside the forest, Elder Shur asks the prince if he is ready. Our sacred mother tree has finally answered their plea, granting them rare passage forward. Offering his own son Luca as a guide, the elder's help is appreciated, but Calian declines. Instead, the prince insists on traveling with Shayurus, a familiar face. He asks if Shayurus can navigate this terrain, and the elf readily agrees. Calian warns him that no escort will return with him. Shayurus shrugs, claiming he can find his way even with his eyes closed. Calian notices the elf is speaking quite casually. With things quiet now, the elf asked what was happening, but Calian noticed something. He saw a mysterious stone in the elf's hand. Calian took it, asking what it was. Had the elves stolen this thing alongside the holy relics, but Luca claimed he didn't remember. Luca could not recall, but Arsene suggested the stone might be a holy relic. It was found on Luca when he returned to the village, a black stone alongside the relics. Because it lay next to the other artifacts, it could easily be one of them. But Yan argued that it felt too dangerous, giving off a heavy scent of blood. The blood stench was strong. Calian realized Arsene could not sense the ominous energy yet. But Calian felt a terrible dread. It held a massive, stolen life force. It hummed with the raw energy of stolen life and spilled blood. This meant the original owner had been utterly destroyed, so Calian decided to investigate. Calian handed the stone back to Ja, telling him to hold on to it for now. They would need the artifact to communicate on the long road ahead. The elf agreed to keep it safe and return it once they reached the trail's end. Once they crossed the path, Yan turned to the prince, asking about the strange child. Did Ja answering before being asked questions mean the child could see the future? Calian reminded him of the elf's explanation. It was not foresight at all. The future was simply arriving a bit faster for this unique young elf. Distortion of time, and a stone capable of neutralizing any related skills. Calian wondered if this anomaly was somehow connected to the axis of time. Meanwhile, Prince Randall quietly stared at the rose bushes, keeping his thoughts to himself. He remained silent, not uttering a single word. There was not one bud on the branches. The first prince remembered how his younger brother promised the roses would bloom soon. Calian had successfully removed Lennon. The first prince reached for his wrist. He unfastened a necklace from his wrist, holding a dry rose branch in his other hand. Suddenly, the pearl on the necklace glowed brightly, reacting with the dead wood. Fresh green leaves sprouted on the branch, rapidly growing right before his eyes. A delicate pink bud formed, slowly opening until it unfurled into a gorgeous flower. The first prince murmured that watching this plant bloom was still highly satisfying. Meanwhile, the young third prince was deep in the forest, sitting under a tree. Meditating in the lotus position, Calian let his powerful aura expand all around. Connecting through the ring, Manasol congratulated the young prince on his progress. Calian did not gain a new magic circle, but his physical aura grew stronger. Manasol noted that breaking the deep habit of holding a sword was incredibly difficult. That sword instinct kept his mana from forming a new circle, turning it into aura instead. Calian replied that he understood, even if the subconscious shift puzzled him. Since he possessed an abundance of mana, why did his instincts redirect it this way? His mentor told him to prepare, as they would not go back yet. They would not return to Kairos until Calian found the answer to this question. Suddenly, the little elf shouted that he had finally found the path's end. Stepping out, Calian looked upon the vast, legendary land of elephants stretching before him. They had arrived at the Duchy of Siegfried and just said it was time to part. The young elf held out the black stone, asking Calian to take it back. Calian asked if the elf truly had to go back to his hidden village. The others were uneasy about having Zhou as a guide, but Calian felt different. Calian noticed how the villagers kept their distance from Sheris. It was clear that things were likely even worse when they did not have any guests. The prince suggested presenting his case to the will of Sisfenian if needed. Still, Sheris admitted that the locals really did not like him at all. Yet the World Tree declared that he is who he is, reminding them that just because someone is different does not mean they must be changed. Telling the prince not to worry, Calian promised the elf they would meet again. Sheris said he would eagerly wait as the castle's massive walls loomed ahead. Protecting the Sisfenian land, these massive barriers made Calian think that every Prince of Kyrie standing here was thanking fate that the Siegfried family never took the throne. Calian then told Jan that while they were here, he did not need to serve him. Being hated by 20 angry knights was already brutal, and there would be way more hostile people inside the castle. For now, Jan's servant duties were over, but Jan assured the prince that he was completely confident and could handle any challenge that came his way. Showing the prince the map, Jan noted they were just at the outer gate. Calian assumed their long journey was done, but the inner castle was 2 days away. He never expected this massive stronghold to be the size of an entire city. He thought he would meet the family head today, but this vast land was truly a grand duchy. Staring at his magic stone, the young prince wondered if his mana had transformed into an aura, even though its core essence remained the same. He always believed these were completely distinct energies. But now everything changed, and his habit of converting mana to aura still lingered. If so, he would just use the aura as fuel for his magic. Jan peeked into the prince's room and noticed that Calian's mana, which once left a faint trail, was now rushing forward like a mighty, unstoppable river. It no longer felt warm and gentle, turning freezing cold and chilling him completely. The prince's talent was truly limitless, leaving everyone wondering where his power would stop. Finally, Calian achieved his ultimate goal, successfully mastering fourth circle magic. With his magic sorted, the immediate problems were gone, and Jan showed him where to go. Right now, only 6 legendary sword masters existed across the entire continent. In their world, those with superior strength can easily detect a weaker presence. The Grandmaster rode out from the gates, offering a respectful greeting to the prince. He welcomed the exhausted royal, knowing the journey had been incredibly long and tiring. This formidable warrior was the second most powerful swordmaster on the continent. His power far exceeded Calian's. The prince offered his greetings to the duke, noting they had not met in ages. Just one look proved he was a true master. The duke observed that the third prince had matured greatly since their last meeting. Looking at the young royal, the master of the house saw a true warrior. The duke mentioned that so much had changed about him, but Calian simply replied that it was merely a minor adjustment, nothing too major at all. The duke disagreed, refusing to call it minor, and offered to escort his guests. As they headed inside, Jan stood by, watching as the master of the house praised the magician's choice of apprentice, calling him a brilliant young talent who possessed incredible magical gifts and ranked as the 6th strongest swordsman around. The duke declared that despite his position, he had not wasted these years. The duke noted that he could easily discern the third prince's growing aura. He saw magnificent progress, knowing the prince's mentor must be enjoying this. Watching his student's brilliant development, the duke then informed Calian he had urgent inspection duties that prevented them from dining together. Calian quickly told him not to worry since it was fine. He had arrived early anyway. Meanwhile, Alan informed his royal guest that Prince Calian had safely arrived in the exotic land of elephants. King Rumin admitted he was unsure when to light the sacred flame. Alan asked if this meant the king still had not chosen. Rumin declared that Calian would be the last of his sons to complete the initiation rite, making all 3 eligible to rule. Prince Randall was a reserved and exceptionally cautious young man. His secretive nature made it impossible to understand his inner thoughts. Prince Plants was the strongest, but his rebellion knew no bounds. Meanwhile, young Calian was only just starting his path to maturity. King Rumin admitted he worried about this, so Alan proposed something. He suggested declaring the most unpopular prince as the chosen successor. The other two would eliminate him in the struggle, solving everything. Alan also noted that Randall would continue staying in the shadows, until Prince Calian finally decided to leave the palace behind him. Only then could the king look directly into his secret thoughts. Until that day, His Majesty had to remain completely silent. They could not let worries about tomorrow ruin their current peace. And the flames of Calian burst forth, only the worthy would rule. Meanwhile, the third prince walked down a cave path that went forever. With no exit in sight, he wondered how deep this cavern went. Suddenly, a bright, sunlit space opened up, making Calian squint. He felt an incredibly pure magic that surpassed all human limits. A sharp, piercing aura filled the air, terrifying anyone nearby. This was far more than mere willpower, and Calian bowed deeply. He offered his deepest respects to the legendary dragon, Sisfanian. It was Sisfanian herself in the flesh, revealing her true form. Calian thought her spiritual projection alone would have sufficed for them. He endured a suffocating, oppressive magical pressure that suddenly stopped. Sisfanian spoke, noting that a young stranger had entered her domain. This child carried the vivid memories of a completely different reality. He had taken her blessing and forged it into a dangerous weapon. Sisfanian asked what drove him to do this, explaining his summons. Outside, a brilliant beam of light suddenly connected the earth and sky. This massive phenomenon instantly captured the attention of everyone nearby. Arson remarked that this happened right as the prince's initiation started. Everyone wondered what was happening, as nothing like this ever occurred. Jan grew incredibly worried about Calian's safety as the light surged. The Duke approached his son, asking if he truly cared for the boy. Yan asked if his father shouldn't be inspecting the estate, but the Duke replied that he had only just returned. Soon, a young girl approached to introduce herself as Veronica Manisel, the granddaughter of Elon, while Rachel Grace, Elon's daughter-in-law, stood nearby. Sisfania then approached the prince. Gently touched his face, she promised to look into everything. Suddenly, illusions of clashing knights materialized around them. Sisfania explained that now everything was perfectly clear. Then she began speaking in an incomprehensible tongue. Calian froze. He did not understand a single thing. Could not make out a single word. Sisfania explained that the prince had not heard her words because she deliberately blocked him. Calian asked if Serenti was involved in this. Sisfania admitted that was indeed her name, the queen of the gods who fought face to face with the Voidbringer during the Great War of the Two Gods, standing alongside the 8 heroes of Elda. Calian noted that Serenti fell into a deep sleep after sealing away the Voidbringer's tomb, leaving her with no choice. Sisfania countered that even in sleep, her divine essence lives on. Sisfania explained she was only alive because she allowed her will to take physical form, urging Calian to focus on other, far more critical questions instead. Calian asked when the legendary artifact known as the Axis of Time was in Sisha. He wanted to understand why Caius tried to claim it. Sisfania answered, but the prince still could not understand. Calian grew anxious. Why was this happening? Wasn't he allowed to hear the truth? Sisfania chided that his impatience opposed Serenti's sacred will. She explained that the young prince was seeking answers to what would happen after his own death. Knowing this secret too soon could disrupt the natural flow of time. Calian frowned, realizing that a deity this powerful was actively keeping secrets from him. Did it mean some massive crisis had forced her direct intervention? Calian realized things were far more serious than he had imagined. How was the axis of time tied to everything happening? Calian asked if his brother had used the axis of time to bring him back to life. Sisfania countered that Chase was first and foremost the king, not his brother. Did Calian really believe his brother would shatter the natural order just for him? Calian realized that in that case, Chase wasn't the one who used the axis to meddle with the flow of time. Sisfania then asked the prince to show what he was holding. Calian complied, handing her the stone. She examined while speaking, but once again, Calian couldn't understand her. She told the prince to always keep the stone close. He might not have found all the answers he sought today. Sisfania added this was just the beginning of his journey. In due time, everything would fall into place. She urged the young prince to return whenever he felt ready to meet again. On that day, countless carrier pigeons took flight, carrying urgent messages to their Various masters, a pillar of light, blindingly bright, erupted into the sky visible. From the outer walls of Siegfried Castle, right as Prince Calian entered. Sisphania's empty temple, the Duke never imagined seeing so many birds in. The heir at once, had they all been hiding on the Siegfried estate. The heir of the Sagrid Duchy approached the Duke told his daughter that it was an incredible sight, and he could truly appreciate it. His daughter replied that immense power always attracts the gaze of envious rivals. She added that no matter where those birds were flying, their paths would cross sooner or later. They needed to discover which noble houses dared to place watchers on their lands and stay alert. The Duke laughed, saying he always knew he married the right woman. Dmitri could thank his mother for the sharp mind she gave her children. It certainly was not something they inherited. The Duke noted that his daughter had missed one crucial point, being too cautious could be seen as playing political games, dangerous territory. Their family did not seek power or crown kings, but remained an unshakable pillar of support. Still, the Duke suggested acting decisively this time. Father and daughter looked up and saw the third prince at a window. The Duke admitted his daughter's fears had not escaped his attention. If they needed to find out who sent these spies, they would do it right away. They would not obviously boost security measures, but they would act quietly. His daughter could be sure of that. Besides, her brother was watching the prince. Yan asked his father if he had seen the massive flock. The Duke replied they filled the sky. Calian remembered Sisphania's words about coming back when he felt ready. Calian wondered what else she was ready to reveal. Jai told the prince that he had been standing there for quite a while. The assistant asked if the prince had noticed anything interesting. Calian replied that there was indeed a curious sight in the garden. Just look at who is down there. Kyrie and Hina stood. The girl played with a poodle puppy named Yan, the Sagrid family's pet. Yan could not believe his father had named the dog after him. Calian teased that they looked alike, though the puppy